Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Albany Revitalization Agency budget meeting. Can we have a roll call, please?
Collins.
Here.
Chrisman.
Here.
Pearson.
Here.
Keller.
Here.
Canopa.
Here.
Holden.
Here.
Here.
Summers.
Here.
Kellum.
Here.
Connolly.
Here.
Kopsinski.
Here.
Coburn.
Here.
Johnson. Here. Thompson.
Here.
Thank you. First order of business here is to elect officers, and the current slate is listed there for you. Colleen will not be able to be at the meetings next week, so we thought we might want to try a new secretary or any other nominations. Do we have nominations for officers?
Secretary.
I would move a re-election of the existing slate.
I would second that.
Even though Colleen won't be here next week?
The official secretary, we have it recorded.
Okay.
That'll be fine.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, passes. Thank you.
You get to work.
I don't believe we have any emailed or website comments for this meeting. Any audience comments? Or public comment? Okay. We also have before us the minutes from the May 7th, 2015 ARA budget meeting.
Move for adoption of the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so we're ready for the budget message. All right. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Fix that a little bit. All right, good evening, Chair Folden, Mayor, and Budget Committee members. I'm Kate Portia, and I'm proud to be serving in my 10th year here at the City of Albany as the Urban Renewal and Economic Development Director. And tonight, I'm going to be pretty brief in going through the Albany Revitalization Area budget, because I know you've got a lot of other larger budgets on your agenda tonight, but I did want to give you an overview and make sure we could go through and have a chance to answer any questions you might have. So real briefly, and I think all of you were here last year, so I'll be brief when we talk through this, but thank you. Of course, our Albany Revitalization Agency is our urban renewal district, and it relates back to our strategic plan through Goal 4 under Section 3, which is the section related to a healthy economy. And of course, Goal 4 relates specifically to our Urban Renewal Agency and funding the reinvestment and revitalization of the central Albany area. So our urban renewal funding, our district has been around since the year 2002. The maximum indebtedness of the plan, that's a really important number because that's sort of the covenant that we make with the other taxing districts as to how much of the funds we will use. Our maximum indebtedness number is $56 million. And so far through June of 2015, we have spent about $18 million of that, which leaves us with about $38 million toward that maximum indebtedness number. So that kind of gives you an idea of where we're at in the lifespan of the district. And on the screen, too, is the map of the urban renewal area that I think most of you are familiar with. So when we talk about urban renewal, there, of course, are benefits in the great projects that we're able to achieve, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about those tonight, but there's also costs, and those costs come from our partners, the various taxing districts. Of course, the City of Albany is one of the largest. On this screen, I'd like to point out this comes from our annual report that we're required by statute to produce each year, and it's a line item by item breakdown of the contributions that come from the taxing districts. Of course, these funds that come to us are used for a finite amount of time in a finite specific geographically defined area for very specific projects that we've been working to fund. On this slide, I did want to point out the two arrows. The yellow arrow, I think you were all here last year when we discussed that because of the change in legislation, urban renewal districts like ours here in Albany, there's just a handful of them in the state, used to have an effect on local option levies. Legislation changed that, so we no longer have an effect on new local option levies. So as you may recall, last year, we stopped taking from the Lynn County local option levy, that's the yellow arrow. And then this year, when we built the budget in an effort to be conservative in thinking through our revenues coming in, we did not include the Albany local option levy because if it should pass, we would no longer receive those funds from that local option levy. So again, I want to let you know that we were conservative in the way that we put our budget together in thinking about revenues. So some assumptions that we used for heading into this fiscal year's budgets. A lot of this is like we saw last year. We have done both public and private projects. The CARA Advisory Board, which is made up of our City Council and then 7 lay members, their consensus has been to use our cash on hand to fund public-private partnerships, and then to use borrowed funds to pay for these large infrastructure projects that we have in the plan. And we've got a couple biggies coming up, specifically the Downtown Streetscapes project that we're looking at, which will be 2nd Avenue, 3rd Avenue, 1 block of Broad Albin, as well as work on Lyon and Ellsworth Streets. Current debt on the books, we have one bond from 2007, Series A. It matures in the year 2022, so of course payments for that were included. And in terms of 15-16 accomplishments, I put up a photograph of the innovative housing project that I think many of you are familiar with, and this was removing the blighted, severely blighted mobile home park there on Salem Avenue and putting in 54 units of much-needed workforce housing. And it's a project that I myself am really proud of. We've seen great results. They're full, reduced crime rate, so a really good project that was funded in part with urban renewal money. So our other 15-16 accomplishments, the previous pause that we took on funding meant that we have very strong reserves on hand, which has led to a pretty robust ability to borrow funds. And so when you see in this year's budget, we've slated to borrow a significant amount of funds to go forth and do those public infrastructure projects, primarily the streetscape. Wayfinding signs are also teed up and just about ready to go. And then in this current fiscal year, we did complete the pass-through of funds for both the fire station and police station because the Urban Renewal District made a contribution totaling about $1.5 million to those two facilities. So in terms of this year's budget, I emailed to all of you my preamble, the line by line, because I know some of you really like to delve in and look through the details. And rather than go through that, I thought what I would do at this point is open it up to questions, see if I could answer or clarify any questions or comments you might have regarding the specific line items and the breakout.
I have a question. On page 6, the economic development transfer out of $209,900. What's the makeup of that? Is it all personnel?
Yes, the transfer out to Economic Development Fund, yes, is for personnel because the costs related to personnel reside in the city's economic development funds. So we pass through costs related to my percentage of salary when I work on urban renewal, as well as then the proposed new position for Nathan Reed as urban renewal coordinator.
So part of that's in here, and then the other $50,000 for his position is on another line, right?
It's all in the same line item.
It is?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Jeff?
Kate, on the property taxes, the current line item,
Yes.
there's a pretty significant decrease between year-to-date 15-16
Yeah.
and the proposed. Is that kind of what you were talking about as far as being conservative?
So it is being conservative because what we did is we backed out that roughly what was last year $178,000 that we received from the City of Albany's local option levy, we did not include that in this current proposed budget. Had it been included, had the law not changed, you would have seen an increase in the tax increment, but we're literally pulling one of the sources that we're no longer going to receive funds from, and that results in the decrease.
Are there comments or questions?
The only thing then, Kate, that I'm kind of a little concerned on is for the increase for the transfer out to economic development that is paying for staffing is still close to, well, it's 200 and almost 210,000 transferred out, where the total personnel services is 250. So that really only leaves a small amount for the economic development side that's non-CARA related side on that. So, I mean, I just want to make sure CARA's not paying more than it should be for the economic development side.
Sure, and that's a great question. So the way in urban renewal best practice, you only would use urban renewal funds to pay for urban renewal work. So each year when I build the budget, I do a good faith estimate of how much of my time I'll be spending on urban renewal related issues versus how much time I'll be spending on economic development activities. Last year, for my salary, that was 70%. I increased it by 5% this year only because of these large streetscape projects and the wayfinding projects have been taking up a fair amount of time, so I increased it a little bit. In the past, though, I'm trying to think of an example. There was one fiscal year where we had slated for a transfer out for a temporary employee, but we didn't end up hiring that person, so we brought the funds back into this fund. So I guess I would say we're very cognizant of that, and we work really hard to make sure we're only paying for truly urban renewal related activities.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions, we have before us the budget resolution, so if there's any further deliberation on that. If not, you have the resolution in front of you.
Move for adoption of the resolution for approving the ARA budget for fiscal year 2016-17.
I second it.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Kate. Is there any other business from the committee? Okay, meeting adjourned. No, that meeting's adjourned. Move on to the next meeting. I'd like to call to order the City of Albany Budget Committee meeting. Do we need another roll call, please? Thank you.
Collins.
Here.
Chrisman.
Here.
Pearson.
Here.
Keller.
Here.
Canopa.
Here.
Holden.
Here.
Olson.
Here.
Summers.
Here.
Kellum.
Here.
Connolly.
Here.
Kupczynski.
Here.
Coburn.
Here.
Johnson. Here. Thompson.
Here.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is election of officers, and this past year was the same slate as the ARA committee.
I would move that we elect the same slate as last year.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries.
I must say, I do appreciate you taking on the chair, Sue. You really do a good job.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so now we need to read this little statement for the public hearing for the state shared revenue. This is a public hearing to receive public comments of the city's uses of state shared revenues as part of the proposed budget of the fiscal year 2016-2017. The public hearing is open at 6:45 p.m. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment? All right, public hearing is closed at 6:45 p.m. So moving on to the regular budget meeting public comment, I do have one email here to read. There was a citizen who emailed in a complaint request, which got resolved, but, so Margaret Dutton of 1440 City View Place Southwest wants the streets to be swept and storm drains to be cleaned more frequently. She plans to attend the May 10th meeting to make her case to the Budget Committee in person. And then she followed up with an email that 2 days later, her streets were cleaned, and so she was not coming to the meeting. Her issue was resolved. So is there any other public comment?
Question. Was the fact that her street was cleaned, was that the normal rotation, or did someone get heads up and say, hey, go clean that?
Normal rotation.
Thank you.
I haven't heard complaints.
Okay. If there's no further comment, then we'll move on to adoption of the minutes from last budget cycle meeting. So we have 5 meetings going from May 7th last year through April 7th of 2016.
Move adoption of all.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. And we are ready for the budget message.
There will be a test.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. I'm not going to read, as I never do, the actual words of the budget message, figuring that everybody else has probably read them by now and doesn't want to hear them again. I am going to say just a few things by way of introduction to the budget before we turn it over to Public Works to explain their budget proposals for this year. The first thing is that I'd like to sort of highlight that this, in some ways, this coming year, it represents what we've said would happen, happening. We talked a couple years, we've been talking over the last several years about the sort of tight financial picture that we've been facing. I've said it so many times now that, we reduced our staffing levels, our full-time equivalent employees from about 428 employees in 2008 down to somewhere below 390. We then had, over the past few years, had increased that to 392 or 3. And in this budget year, we're able to increase it more significantly than that, back up to a little over 400 employees. Again, that is reflective of the improving economy and the increase in assessed value, the reduction in compression from our levies, and our ability to retain financial strength through some very difficult times. And we just got a letter this is from Moody's Investor Service that I wanted to read some of the salient points about, which this was issued May 3rd, so it's pretty current stuff. And this is what it says about Albany's credit overview. It says, Albany's credit position is sound. The notable credit factors include a very strong financial position and exceptionally low debt liability. It also reflects a solid socioeconomic profile with a sizable tax base. In regards to the city finances, it says the city has a robust financial position, which is a notable strength in relation to the assigned rating of A1. The fund balance as a percent of operating revenue far surpasses the U.S. median and saw an impressive increase between 2012 and 2015. Now that's talking about all funds, so it includes we're not just talking about the general fund here, we're talking about our utility funds and other funds of the city. Albany's cash balance as a percent of revenues, which they list at 38%, is on par with others Moody's rated cities nationwide. It says the city has affordable debt and pension burdens which are favorable when compared to its A1 rating. The one that I like best, of course, is under management and governments. It says balanced financial operations indicate good financial management. In this instance, Albany approximately broke even during this time. The tax base grew moderately. And the breaking even may not sound impressive, but it just basically says we're living within our means, which I think is what we have set out as a goal to do. So, to me, this represents good news. Through tough economic times, the city has been able to maintain a good, strong financial position, which means that when we are in a position where we have to borrow funds, our taxpayers are being saved dollars because we're not having to pay for a higher interest rate. Additionally, if you look at if you look at the rating as it goes on, one of the things that it does note is that we're at about 88% of the national average in terms of income, personal income in the city. So we're not a wealthy community. We're we're not a poor community, but we're not wealthy, and so we've been able to do this. I think with some limitations on the amount of resources that we have available to us. As long as the economy stays strong, and of course that's anybody's guess as to how long, I would predict that we're going to be in reasonably decent financial position. Now that doesn't mean we can fund everything we want to fund, and there are some notable shortcomings and issues that you'll hear about from the different directors as the budget is presented over the course of the next few nights. But if you think in terms of, well, how do we stack up against other cities, aside from our financial management picture, we get regular reviews of how the city is doing in a lot of different areas. Some of you may have seen the rating that the city received from this national company on the safety of the city, where the city of Albany was rated as the 3rd safest city in Oregon. Now, I've never been a big believer in lists because I don't think they fully take into account all the different factors, and sometimes they misinterpret the data. But this one really confirmed what we already know from our crime data and just from living here. It isn't, and the relative ranking, whether we're 3rd or 18th, the point is that we have very little violent crime in Albany. We have an excellent emergency response to different kinds of crises, because safety, of course, isn't just a matter of police responding to calls. It's also a question of, are we able to respond to medical emergencies? Do we have water crises like they had in Flint, Michigan, that kind of thing? And, I think it's fair to say that Albany rates very highly on the thing that we invest in most extensively. Public safety, in terms, as I said in my budget message, it's where our heart is, because it's also where our money is, or vice versa. We put a lot of resources into that particular item, and it shows. And it shows in terms of both inputs and outputs, and not just outputs, but outcomes, that we end up with a safe place for us to live and for our children and grandchildren. So, this is perhaps the most optimistic budget message I've given in a long, long time. Because I believe that we're on a safe and reasonable course. We have the ability and to add to the strength of our financial position in the year ahead, and I think we should make every attempt to do so. One of the things that I noted in my budget message was that we're spending down a reserve that we've had outside our general fund in the form of our settlement revenues that we receive from the PepsiCo. That money is being used for big projects. We're using it to buy down the cost of the police and fire stations, and we used it to help support an initiative to train students and to assist both our 7 largest industries and LB in their training programs. So because of that, I think it's really important for us to be conscious of the reserves that we maintain and in our general fund and also in our enterprise fund. So that limits a little bit what we're going to do. I do want to talk just for a brief moment about a consequence of conservation, of having to cut back. About, I guess it's been 5-6 years ago, we lost a position in our human resources department. Many of you may remember Scott Rowland, who went on to become the HR director at Lynn Benton Community College. And because of the tight times, and because we were having to cut back staffing levels in our line departments, police, fire, parks and rec, we decided that we would not fill Scott's position. And one of the things that he was responsible for was safety in the city. And the city had a commendable safety record. for a number of years. Every year, I would go to the League of Oregon Cities Conference and go up and collect our award for that. With Scott's departure and our decision not to fill that position, gradually over time, our safety record has gotten less robust. I won't say it's horrible, but it's not where it should be. And what's happened, I think, and we had a discussion about this today, is that we spread the duties out, which is what you typically do when you have, when you don't have as many people as you used to have. You take some of those duties that you regard as essential and you farm them out to people. And so we've farmed out some of Scott's safety responsibilities, and we still have, we're meeting all the legal requirements. We have safety committee meetings and the like. Again, we're just not getting the same effect that we had when we had that position in place. And I'll be honest with you, I hadn't really picked up on that change. And it's costing us because our premiums are now higher because of our declining safety record. And I think one of the things that we need to look at, maybe even outside the budget process in the year ahead, is the idea of bringing that position or something like it back in one form or another. Again, in meeting with our insurance agent over the issue, that was one of his first suggestions, is that I think you need to have somebody who's specifically in charge of that particular effort, just as any organization of our size ordinarily would. You'd have like a designated safety officer. So while on the one hand, I'm proud that we have been able to weather the rough times and be conservative and look for ways to trim expenses, I'm also cognizant of where sometimes, those economies may be short-term economies and in the long term may actually end up costing you. So we're trying to be conscious of those situations as well. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any overall questions of the budget, although I think the real folks that can speak to the proposed budget are the folks that you'll be hearing from for the next few nights.
I'd just like to commend Wes, because I believe this is probably your final address to us in this regard. So thank you very much for the time I'm going to associate with you. I think you've done a very, very commendable job all the way throughout the recession and everything else. Your whole team has been exemplary in helping Albany weather the whole process, so thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, and in fairness, I am going to be around for one more year. We'll make Stuart deliver this address next year, though. I'm just looking forward to that. And again, Ray, I think you know this, and I would be remiss if I didn't say it, that whatever has been accomplished here has been, I think, a real team effort. That it starts with good leadership at the council level, good participation, good involvement by the community. I mean, we forget how many hundreds of people volunteer their time to make this city work, in addition to the efforts of paid staff. And I think it's a tribute. If you look at Albany and say Albany's a good place to live, it's true because people are willing to invest of their time and their energy and their money to make it that way. So.
All right, thank you, Wes.
Thank you.
So we're ready for Public Works.
And the first victims arrive.
The team event with several binders.
Yeah, safety.
Yeah.
My hernia belt.
Need a two-wheel cart.
It's crazy.
Oh, you might want four wheels
Paperless
for that.
government.
Yeah, really.
Dual tandem.
Sorry, my fault. Where is it?
Thank you.
Well, good evening, and thank you for entertaining us for the next few minutes. My name is Chris Bailey, and tonight Jeff Blaine and I will be presenting the Public Works budget request. You may remember that Public Works Department was administratively separated for the current fiscal year. So we have actually two departments. However, we continue to function basically as one. There's been no real change in funding or assignment of activities. This has helped us maintain our goal of providing our services to the community as efficiently as possible. I'm the Public Works Operations Director, and I'm responsible for operations and maintenance of the city's water, wastewater, stormwater, streets, transit, and airport programs, along with several internal service programs that we have. Jeff?
So I'm going to see if I can just talk loud enough, and hopefully this will pick a little bit up. Can everybody hear me? Do I try to avoid the noise? Can you hear me?
I can hear you as long as it's coming okay on the recording.
Oh,
Okay.
Michael.
I got thumbs
You're
up
good.
back
Okay.
there. Excellent. So as Chris said, my name's Jeff Blaine. I am the Public Works Engineering and Community Development Director. Means I'm working in two departments. I'll participate in this Public Works presentation, and then we'll switch gears and move right into the Community Development presentation. On the engineering side of things, we're responsible for design and construction of capital projects, so things like water lines, sewer lines, storm drain facilities, street reconstruction projects. We're also responsible for development review, regulatory affairs, long-range planning, utility billing, and then we also have the administrative services for all of Public Works and the Community Development Department.
So Mary handed out the two things, the Public Works Budget Summary Information Sheet and a copy of the slides, so you can follow along. First, we want to express our sincere gratitude and thanks to the supervisors and staff that helped develop these program budgets, many of whom are in the back in case we get stuck, to help us. We have challenges like every other department, but we're excited about our path forward in the future for Public Works. So it's notable that this budget does not include any significant organizational changes nor any significant financial changes over the current year. Our total proposed budget is almost $89.7 million. There are over 100 pages of Public Works budget sheets in the budget book. These include operating programs, debt service, and capital programs. We're going to provide a quick overview of the department and what it does and how we do it, and changes in for next year's proposed budget, and then we'll get into the detail of the sheets. Since everyone has been here before, I'm going to try to go quickly through the slides because we do have a lot to cover, but please feel free to stop me if you have any questions as I go through the slides. So Public Works provides a wide range of responsibilities for the city's infrastructure, broken down into transportation, wastewater, drinking water, and stormwater. Through these programs, we address all of the themes in the strategic plan. Within the transportation division, we have the street system, of course, Albany Municipal Airport. We have 3 public transit programs. The street system comes with about 200 miles of improved streets, 21 traffic signals, over 7,000 signs, and 61 miles of striping, all of which require some level of maintenance, improvement, and repair and replacement over time. The engineering department provides design, construction services, and long-range planning for all of those programs. In wastewater, we have a conveyance system that consists of about 220 miles of sewer mains with 11 sewer lift stations. Treatment takes place at the Water Reclamation Facility and Talking Water Gardens. Within the sewer fund, we also provide services for response to environmental concerns such as leaking underground storage tanks. We provide federally required permitting for significant industrial users that are connected to the city's sanitary sewer system. And wastewater provides a significant amount of maintenance of the city's stormwater system. Engineering staff works on design and construction services for projects related to the sewer system and repairs of it, long-range utility planning, and regulatory consultation. The drinking water program includes the San Diego Albany Canal, the distribution system, including 7 reservoirs, and we have water treatment at 2 water treatment plants. Engineering provides, again, design and construction services for water pipe replacement projects as well as capital projects at our reservoirs and treatment facilities, and management of long-range planning and regulatory services. The department conducts several stormwater-related activities, but there is not a dedicated funding source, as we all know, for stormwater. Our work efforts are funded through street and sewer utilities, both of which have their own financial challenges. In this year's budget, we have proposed creating a separate stormwater fund to improve the transparency of stormwater revenues and expenditures, and to create a framework to support implementation of a stormwater fee if council decides to do that over the next fiscal year. Public Works also has a handful of internal service programs which charge back to the utilities. These include utility billing, water quality control, instrumentation and control, facilities maintenance, engineering services, and administration. These programs charge back to the underlying utilities for the cost of their services. So those are the things we do. And we do that with a staff of, proposed staff for next fiscal year of 122.43 FTE, which is an increase of 2.58 FTE, which I'll talk about in more detail in just a few minutes. These personnel are divided into two departments, engineering and operations. Within engineering, there is engineering services and utility billing services, which has 28 full-time equivalent employees, and the administration division, which has 10. The administration division provides support to Public Works engineering, Public Works operations, as well as community development. Over in operations, we have 84.43 FTE that work across all three utilities, as well as several internal service programs. Funding for transportation comes from a variety of sources depending on the program, including local, state, and federal sources, as well as revenue that the programs themselves generate. Funding for wastewater programs primarily through rate revenue and SDCs, as well as payments from the City of Millersburg and ATI Wachang for treatment of their wastewater. Funding sources for water are also primarily rates and SDCs, with additional amount from the City of Lebanon and Millersburg. The amount noted here for the City of Lebanon is a result of the recently negotiated IGAs over the canal in Lebanon, which will be coming to council next month for final signatures. Notable things for the budget request for next year. The total budget request of $89.7 million is a 1.5% increase over the current year's budget. We've prepared this budget based on assumed utility rate increases for sewer and water based on the rolling 5-year projections that we present to council every year. We did not assume any changes in the current stormwater funding. For sewer, there is an assumed 3% increase this July, which is down from our estimate last year of 6% for this year. And for water, we have an assumed 3% increase in January of 2017. Again, our emphasis for the coming year is to continue to work to create efficiencies that will allow us to keep our rate increases as low as possible while still being responsible with our infrastructure. The proposed budget is basically the status quo from the current year, but there are some personnel changes that we're going to discuss in an overview right now. In operations, within the public transit program, we're requesting to add FTE to 3 part-time positions. One is Lynn Benton Loop, and then 2 are in the paratransit program. All of these are the result of these employees working far beyond their part-time FTE now, and in a result of increased demand for those services. Within water, we're requesting reclassification of 1 position from water maintenance 2 to water maintenance 3 as a recognition of the different responsibilities that individual has. This is our cross-connection control or backflow prevention specialist who has additional training and responsibilities that warrant a reclassification upward. In treatment, you'll see as we go through the budget, we're not changing any FTE, we're just shifting them so that they're equally divided among the 2 treatment plants, so I'll point that out as we go. In facilities maintenance, we're requesting a few changes. This work group bears quite a bit of responsibility for the success of all of the other work groups in operations. What I'm requesting is that we would reclassify the manager upward to be on par with the superintendents that we have from water, wastewater, and transportation, which frankly should have been done some time ago. I'm also requesting a reclassification of a lead worker to a supervisor, which will create some space for the manager to do actual work. Currently, that manager would be supervising 14 people, plus his own work, which is very difficult. The addition of a supervisor would divide the group effectively in half so that he would have a little more time to actually get some work done. The only new position we're requesting in Public Works is the system administrator position within the SCADA group. SCADA provides instrumentation and control through a secure computer network for many Public Works facilities. All of the treatment plants, lift stations, reservoirs, all along the canal. If many of our facilities have data points that rely on the SCADA network, it's becoming increasingly sophisticated, and we rely on it more and more every year. We currently have a technician who's actually working most of the time as a system administrator, and it's appropriate to create a position for him that reflects the work that he's doing. And the last change is to move the inventory specialist from ops admin into the facilities group, which makes a little more sense managerially within our operations group. Oh, wait, Ray?
On page 8, you mentioned on the top half, it mentions the overall staff increase of 2.58 FTE. Then on the bottom on operations, you've got a 0.5, 0.63, a 0.45, and a 1 and a 1. That comes up to more than 2.58.
Well, there's a one new position, and then there are the half and the 2 part-time position. That should add up to the 2 point. So the bottom 1.0 is not a new position. It's moving one position from the ops admin program over to facilities maintenance. So you have 0.5, 0.63, and 0.45 are additional FTE we're requesting, and then adding the new 1.
What that says from operation administration. so
Right.
Okay, I'm
Right.
good.
Okay.
On the engineering side, all of our changes are reclassifications, either upwards or downwards, so there are no new positions being requested on the engineering side. The first bullet that you see here is in regards to 2 positions that HR reviewed for us at our request. The review identified that the positions are currently being underpaid based on their job descriptions. And so in order to compensate them fairly for the work that they're being expected to perform, we need to make the adjustment on those 2 positions. Second bullet there, we're requesting to reclassify an engineering associate position to a civil engineer 2. Civil engineer 2 is our entry-level professional engineer position. We have a talented young lady who's going to be obtaining she'll be taking her professional engineering exam, and we would like to be able to move her into that entry-level licensed engineer position when she successfully passes that test. That's consistent with our common practice, at least as long as I've been at the city, where when we have a person that leaves the design and construction work group that's a licensed engineer, we look for opportunities to fill that vacancy at a lesser position, an engineering associate position, try to attract perhaps a less experienced but someone who shows a lot of promise type person to bring in and train them, perhaps somebody straight out of school, and then work on developing them and move them into the professional engineer position once they pass their test. So that's the part of that cycle that we're on. The third bullet there is for reclassifying the Public Works Executive Assistant position to an Admin 1. So this is Irene's current position. Irene's going to retire at the end of June, and we are looking to reclassify that position downwards in order to meet the current demands that we have in the department at this time. So we're proposing to downgrade that to an Admin Assistant 1 position. Right now, the thinking is that that position will be half-time out at operations with Chris's crew and half-time in community development. It's kind of the benefit of having the centralized admin services is that we can move pieces around when need be. The fourth bullet there is for reclassifying a senior accountant position to the Public Works and CD business manager position. This is a reclassification upwards. This is a position that Jeff Babbitt currently holds. He's not here tonight, but he's the one that pulls all of our budget documents together for us. He came to the city into the senior accountant position. Since he's came here, he has had a lot of responsibilities added to his plate that include completion of the community development budget and responsibility for all of their financing. He's taking on management of utility billing, and he's also taken on all of our long-range financial planning for utility rates. So he has, over the years, added a lot of responsibilities and expanded his job description for the same pay that he got hired into. So in order to, again, similar to the other ones, fairly compensate him for the work that's being expected of him to perform, we're proposing the reclassification there.
Okay, so that concludes our overview presentation. Are there any questions at this point before we get into the budget sheets?
I've got one. You know, you're retiring, the person who's retiring, generally they have, over the years, picked up so many skills and so much knowledge that trying to replace them is, you find you need 2 or 3 people. What's your plan for replacing that one person with all that knowledge, that broad-based knowledge?
Sure. Irene does a number of things that are a big help to the whole department, and you know, part of what she does is going to be, as Wes described with the other position, part of what she does now will be redistributed to other people. How things have been managed and division of work has changed over the years, and we feel that we'll be able to adequately respond to the retirement with the plan that we have. The issue that you raised, I don't feel is unique to that position. I think if we were diving into personnel discussions in all of the departments, we have a lot of senior department heads, we have a lot of senior managers, and we have a lot of longtime staff people who are approaching retirement. And I think the volume of people that are eligible or planning to leave in the short term creates a very unique challenge for us in order to maintain the level of service that we've come to expect and enjoyed providing with new people who might be very talented but don't have all the skill sets that somebody develops over a 30 to 40-year career. So a big challenge for us department-wide and city-wide.
I have kids older than both of you.
Yes, exactly.
They're very young people.
Yes.
And it's representative of what we're trying to do in the organization, of having a blend of folks who are nearing retirement, also taking advantage of some really
14.
14 and
Yep, 12 and a half. Mhm.
That's pretty good. And so the point being that, you're not going to completely.
We're seeing that a lot. I mean, I could give many names that have retired, and there are new faces in the back of the room this year, and there will be new faces next year and in years to come. And so we try to plan it, get the notice as far ahead as we can, and do some transition planning. And it's hard, though. It's hard to predict everything that you're going to lose.
Colleen?
To go back to page 7, I have a question about the wastewater funding sources.
Okay.
I noticed you have 125,000 Watchang. Is that because they're the only company on the water, or why would that be?
So, Watchung discharges their pretreated wastewater from their Millersburg site directly to Talking Water Gardens. So, we meter their flow into Talking Water Gardens, and they're charged based on the flow into the system. They're the only, what we'd call they discharge directly to the treatment system there. They're the only ones that do that. So they pay us for that treated wastewater.
Okay, thank you.
Watchung's water, the pollutant in it is heat or anything else?
The primary constituent we see from Watchung is total dissolved solids or conductivity. They have a lot of salts, is basically what it works out to be.
And
They do have heat, but they have a limit, a permit discharge limit for heat, and it's all up in the air.
Runs around in a circle a while, so.
Right, yeah.
I'm just curious, how is it that you come up with .63 of a person? I mean, I've done some calculations, and it doesn't come to an even number of hours.
The real number is .625.
Oh,
So I don't know if
well,
that
that makes
comes
it much, yeah,
to
that's
an
5
even
hours,
number of
okay.
hours, but we
Yeah.
have to round for the budget document.
And so .45, the real
Yeah.
number is,
Well, I have a strict rule about doing math in public, so I'd have to ask my engineering friend to multiply .45 times 40 for me.
okay, for the benefit of people watching on TV, are we going to, at some point later in the system, learn why we need a stormwater utility rather than doing it the way we're doing it now? Is that going to be a discussion?
Sure, we'll get to the stormwater fund, but the quick answer for now is that we felt that it created a very transparent way to see the revenue that goes into stormwater activities and the expenditures that come out.
Well, thinking in terms of being a guy out there having people ask me questions, when somebody asks me why it is we have to have a stormwater, it would be nice if I could say, well, it's because if we do it this way now, it means some little guy is going to pay, who uses a lot of water, is going to pay a lot, and some big guy who doesn't use very much water is not going to pay very much, and it makes it fairer. And I guess while it may do that, the reasoning behind it is what I'm,
Oh, so is your question why we would have a charge for stormwater versus? No.
why we have a separate system. And, if that's not helpful to other people, well, we can have this offline.
We'll talk a little bit about the budget specifically. We're having to be a little bit cautious right now as far as what we publish and what we say because of the referendum. And so we have to make sure that whatever we're saying can't be misconstrued as advocacy. So we're struggling with coming to what we're allowed to talk about and what we're not, basically. At least
Maybe I can come up with a good question you can give me factual answers for.
That would be great.
That's great.
Is that accurate? Asking the wrong guy.
If I,
It's only $75.
That's true, that's true.
well, hey,
Okay, so we're going to start going through the budget book now. The image on the slide is the flyer for this year's National Public Works Week, which is next week. So I just wanted to put that out as a plug for all of our great employees.
Ooh, yes.
So we're going to start with the Albany Municipal Airport budgets, which starts on page 118 in your budget book. So there are two programs within the Albany Municipal Airport budgets. First, the airport operating budget. And you'll note there on the program narrative page, there's a .10 FTE, which amounts to 4 hours a week. I can do that math. Of one employee's time to serve as the airport manager. And one of the things that we're working on is the person who does that actually spends far more than 4 hours a week in cumulative time over the course of a year. So we're working on trying to figure out a better way to fund more time for managing the airport and putting in more work there without having other programs subsidize it, which is essentially what's happening now. The overall airport, Albany Municipal Airport budget is largely unchanged for next year. The airport capital program on page 120, this program receives transient lodging tax revenue, and it is used to help pay for capital projects only at the airport. So it provides matching funds for FAA grants for projects at the airport. The project listed for next year is the taxiway connector design, which I will talk about when we get to that budget at the end. But anyway, this fund program provides the match funds for that capital project. Any questions on the airport budgets?
Chris, how many planes are housed out there now?
Oh, boy.
90.
90-ish.
90 full-time? How are the volunteers doing in terms of
Following
getting the jets
guidelines.
ready?
Getting the, so
That's right.
we do have a project, I think it's in the Albany Municipal Airport budget. We're going to be working on it this year. So one of them is, the design is underway. It's going to be placed on a concrete slab near the entrance to the airport on Knox Butte Road. And we're going to paint it. We found the original markings, unit markings for that jet. So it's going to be painted that, and we're going to try to recognize Dick Ebert in some way. He was a pilot in the Marine Corps and instrumental in getting these jets here for display. And so we're thinking of painting his name and call sign on the jet and maybe a plaque. I'm not quite sure yet, but we're going to recognize him in some way. So that should hopefully be done this summer.
So we have 3, correct?
We have 3.
And we're going to mount 1,
We're going to put one on a slab by Knox Butte entrance.
and the other 2?
One of the other 2 is pretty much gutted and put back together. The third one is the process of having the excess weight removed from it, and then it'll be put back together. Their original plan was to put them on sticks in a takeoff type pattern near the freeway. I think we have successfully changed that plan. I don't think it would have flown, so to speak. Sorry, I really didn't plan that, but I'll take credit for it.
It's a little stuck up.
I don't think we would have gotten approval from ODOT for that necessarily. So I think we might try to, we haven't decided yet where they're going to go, but we need to get them on display as soon as we can.
I am not in the loop on what's going on with the capital project at the airport. So could you describe that briefly, please?
Sure. I got ahead of myself. We'll talk about it at the end. It's like the last one we'll talk about. But
Okay.
so the next capital project at the airport is designed for new taxiway connectors. And this is part of the effort to extend the usable length of the runway. It's complicated. If you fly, it's a displaced threshold. So we're going to create a displaced threshold. The first thing to do is to be able to get the planes out to the end of the runway, so we're going to design new taxiway connectors.
That'll make it so we can get more corporate jets in?
More powerful aircraft, so really small business jets or turboprop type aircraft.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Is the end of the runway actually usable as runway, or, well, I know it's usable as runway. Is officially sanctioned as runway?
Not right now.
And that's what we're pointed toward?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other airport questions? Okay, next we have transit. It starts on page 122. Both the Albany Transit Program and the Lynn Benton Loop Program are scheduled to receive new buses this fiscal year. So each of those have a revenue and expenditure associated with the new bus, which is no small thing. In the ATS budget, the 5307 line amount is where we're going to pay for that new bus, so it's significantly increasing. That's line 42045 on the revenue side. The bulk of that increase is the additional funds to purchase the bus. In the Lynn Benton Loop Program budget, we're using a 5309 grant to receive the revenue for the new bus, which is line 42042 in the Lynn Benton Loop budget. Both of those program budgets are otherwise largely the same. The one thing that I will point out on the ATS program on page 124, in the expenditures line 60211 and the insurance line, and this is something you'll see a few times throughout the Public Works budget, is a 456% increase. And the reason for that is the methodology by which the general liability premium is allocated to all city budgets. And I can go into a lot of detail, but essentially we had one small claim on insurance, liability claim in ATS. It was a total payout of $15,000. But the methodology uses total number of claims, and then there's a formula, and your claim number of claims divided by the total number of claims times a percentage of the total liability premium gets to your amount that gets put into your budget. And because transit had one claim out of the number of claims and our premium went way up, their allocated amount went way up as well. You'll see this in a couple of other program budgets. And what I will say is that Stuart and our insurance broker and several department heads met to discuss this because it was shocking to our system when we saw these numbers. And Stuart is working on some ideas and offered to help us pay this particular one using the risk management fund. The problem with that is that it shifts the money from a grant reimbursable line, which insurance is, to a non-grant reimbursable line, and so the city would have been paying the bulk of that. So we decided to leave it here because we can request this under the operating grant. So it's very complicated. I'm sure Stuart would love to talk to you about it if you have more questions. But it will show up a few times in the Public Works budget, and I'll point those out to you.
Is that a function of something we do, or is that a function of something the insurance people do? Who is it that makes the system that changes it?
It's both.
Yeah, we work with our insurance broker to try and get the most competitive liability insurance. Our liability insurance is placed through CIS, so we pool liability insurance with other cities throughout the state. Our insurance premium is based upon our claims loss history primarily. The methodology on how it's allocated among the operating departments is a city decision, city choice.
Is that changeable?
Yes.
I mean, a reason, if it looks like it's gone crazy, I mean, there needs to be a good reason why it went crazy.
Right, and one of the solutions that Chris talked about was using risk management funds to sort of buy down the liability of the smaller departments, and then in the meantime looking at changes that we can make to the process to try and make it more equitable. The problem is that it's if it's like tinkering with something. you do one thing here and it has an impact over here, and what we didn't want to do is suddenly stick that bill into one of the larger departments that was already being charged a fair amount more at the last minute in the budget. See, when we're putting the budget together, a lot of this information, we didn't even know it, and so rather than try and affect the entire budget, we came up with the plan to use risk management funds to buy down their costs.
I could share a little bit more on the process, and like Chris suggested, depending on how long you want to talk about it.
I don't need it.
Okay.
I just, it is something we have control of.
Yes.
I think the problem this year is that we got the numbers, we had already built our budgets when the insurance number came in, and so trying to adjust at that point, as Wes said, is you're not sure what you're going to do to everyone else. So we can handle it within our public works programs this year. It's no fun, certainly. And then we're working with Stuart to try to change what we can to see how it would affect that, and maybe for next year's we'll have a different way of allocating that premium across the programs.
Thank you.
So was there a significant increase in the total premium for the city? Not just because of the $15,000 claim, though? There were other claims?
Yes.
Okay. Will?
So that's also a function of not having the safety officer?
The liability, probably not so much the safety officer. That would impact more workers' comp types of activities. The liability issues would be a little bit different, although safe driving tends to, or safe operations can preclude some damage to property or other circumstances.
Yeah, and I probably oversimplified in my explanation earlier. I mean, that's certainly one factor, is not having someone who's pointed directly at the issue. Other factors that we've talked about are increasing workload. Again, if you assume that 10, 15 years ago our staffing levels were not overly excessive, and our ratio of staff to population was, what, almost I think it was over 8 employees at one time, but a decade ago or more ago it was well over 7, and now we're well under 7. Then something's giving here. I mean, hopefully we found some more efficient ways to do things, and I think there's some truth to that. But I also think that you find some consequences that pop up. One of which is greater workload, greater potential for mistakes, for liability claims, that sort of thing.
On the next page, page 125, what is it that the equipment that we're buying for a little over $10,000, equipment replacement 66011?
Let me get there.
$1,300% change.
What number? Oh, so that 66011, that line? So that is the line where we put money into our equipment replacement reserve fund. So we've been purchasing new buses, and this new bus that we're getting next year, we use the equipment replacement money as match for that bus. So this is building funds for the next bus 5 years from now or so that we'll need to replace.
5 times that amount. Yeah,
Right.
You couldn't buy a bus for...
No, it's, yeah, so our match for those buses is in the $70,000 to $80,000 range. So this is building those funds back up. I did want to point out in the paratransit program, which is page 131, the bottom of the program narrative sheet there under the staffing summary, that's where you'll see those 2 part-time positions in the increase from the 2015-16 FTE to the 2016-17 FTE. We're essentially making 2 part-time employees, full-time employees there, and that's to meet demand for that system. Any other questions on transit?
Yes. What percentage of our expenses are paid for at the fare box?
Oh, I'm so excited because I thought of that question. I almost never
I ask it every year.
predict the question. Okay, so the way I calculate that is city subsidy, so it's the opposite. So on ATS, the total cost per ride is
$4.65.
yeah, whatever it says on there. Operating cost per ride in the current fiscal year for Albany Transit System is $6.60. The fare is $1. And The city subsidy, which is the general fund amount that goes into ATS dividing by cost per ride, is for 15-16, $5.11. So the general fund is paying $5.11 of every trip. The rider is paying $1 for that trip.
And overtime, how long is it, do you have an idea how long it has been, about $1 that they paid?
Oh, yeah. Barry, when do we raise fares? We raised fares in 2012.
From 50 cents or from
I think it was 75 cents
75
to
cents.
$1.
2012?
We're doing transit planning right now through the MPO. They are funding transit planning for Albany Transit and the Loop, and so part of that will be a review of the fare and can we raise the fare? It's a
I mean, when you're paying basically 1/6 of the cost, and you're not paying more in 4 years than 25 cents, when in that same time, hamburgers gone up by, I don't know, 3 times. I mean, it's not like the system. I mean, I understand a subsidy. I don't understand keeping somebody at the same price basically that they were in 2000
Sure.
when, it's a multiple.
Yeah, and that's something that we'll be looking at. I'm not sure if it will conclude that we should raise fares or not.
Well,
We'll see what the
I guess
report
said another way, I'm a student, and I want to go from one place to another, or I work for a living, want to go from one place to another. If I had to pay $3, I couldn't do that and get here any other way or get there any other way. I mean, whether it's 4 guys riding a car, you're still paying more than that. And, that's, should the taxpayer subsidize somebody to do that? I mean, some subsidy, sure.
Well, it's
87%?
a complicated question. The general fund money that is used for transit comes from state shared revenues for liquor taxes. So it's not necessarily local property taxes that are being used for that, just for a point of clarification, but
But it is money out of taxpayer pockets. Anyway, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Do we see any other benefits of people riding buses?
Oh, sure. So one of the requirements of becoming a metropolitan planning or an urbanized area is to do transit planning. It's intended to help reduce congestion, help improve air quality, all those things that transit systems do for larger communities. Our transit system is also, the Albany Transit in particular is a means for people who have no other means to get around town. And so it serves, our last survey was several years ago, but I think something like 87% of the ridership had an annual income of less than $20,000 or $18,000 or something like that. So it's serving a part of the population that otherwise cannot get around town. So it's a necessary service, I think, for the community. It's expensive, though, no doubt. It's expensive.
Well, one of my constituents, who will remain nameless, but was a mayor back in the 60s, and I always thought was pretty far from being very progressive, suggested to me that maybe we'd improve our ridership if we just forgot about charging a fare.
Well, that is also an interesting question. Corvallis went fareless, and their ridership increased by 1,000% or some crazy number. They have lots more ridership, and they already had good ridership. And that is a question that's not, it's worth some discussion.
Yeah, because once you kind of get over the hump, you get enough buses going that it gets to be an easy thing to do. And
Maybe we could pay them to take it. That'd
Maybe that'd be
probably
even
be even
better.
better.
Yeah, let's
We can
try
take it
that.
out of your salary.
My $1.60 a month?
That's right.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
certainly. So we'll be moving on to the street fund now.
Gee, do I have any good
Starts on page
questions for that?
135 with street revenue. The main thing I want to point out on this budget page is line 41246, which is erosion prevention and sediment control permits. It goes to zero next fiscal year, and that money is being moved to the stormwater fund revenue program. So we'll see that when we get there in just a few short minutes. Street maintenance is on page 136. If you look on the budget page on page 137, again, you're going to see in the insurance line that budget is paying a significant larger amount for insurance, over $100,000 of increase. And if you flip over to street admin, which is page 139, then look down at the bottom in contingencies, you'll see our contingency fund has dropped by about $100,000. So the way we covered the street maintenance insurance increases by dropping the contingency amount. We fortunately had the money to do that, so that's how we covered this one this year. For the rest of this budget, it's pretty much status quo. You look like you have a question.
This snowball we're seeing of insurance costs ballooning, was it just one event that caused this, or are there several events that caused this?
So again, because the premium is allocated based on the number of claims compared to the total number of claims, the street program had, I can't remember, 5 or 6 small claims. They did not add up to $100,000 that were paid out in the last fiscal year or calendar year, whichever year they use. But it's not the amount of the claim that's paid out, it's the number of claims. And so you're essentially penalized if you, your proportion gets larger if you have more claims. And so one of the other things we're gonna try to do is sort of pay those out of the operating budget. Rather than submitting them to insurance up to a certain amount, there's no need to submit these small ones because on the backside, you're then receiving this really large insurance bill. If we can pay a $1,000, $3,000 claim out of the budget itself, it makes no sense to submit it to insurance because then we're getting hammered. So.
I drive a car, I understand.
Well, it's not exactly the same thing.
It's close.
It's very, very complicated. It was an interesting meeting. So hopefully, though, it's not a snowball effect. I mean, I think we've identified it this year, and we're going to work on a way to try to control it next year.
Thank you.
You get this penalty for going first of all the departments, but the central service charges, in this particular one, it's an increase of 25% on the program 2604 street administration.
Okay.
We're going to see that throughout the other departments.
I don't think so.
Page 139,
No, I don't know what that
Yeah.
is. I'm not sure why that-
25.67%.
I see that. I'm not sure why. Stuart.
Yeah, as the same with the insurance charges, the central service charges are based on size of operating budget and number of FTEs in the department, based on the actuals of those numbers in the prior year budget. So we'll see fluctuations as size of budget changes from year to year on, it's not a blanket amount across all the operating budgets. It's based on the exposure, if we could use the insurance term and apply it to the central service. I should also mention that the central service budget includes some retirements in next year, and so that budget was increased to pay for recruitment of a city manager position and payoff of a couple positions, and so those are really the larger increases in the central service charge. The allocation, though, will vary among departments based on that formula.
Thank you.
And bear in mind, too, we're estimating, and I think we estimated pretty high based, for example, on the cost of a recruitment for a new city manager. We put in a number that appears to be at least double what the actual amount is likely to be based on the quotations and responses we've got. So again, all these numbers, the proposed numbers are based on estimates and are not based on, what we know we're going to spend. And of course, every year, what we actually spend in each of the budgets is going to be, in total, quite a bit less than what really gets spent. Or what was proposed, excuse me.
That raises a question for me. At what time of the year do you reconcile your projected numbers?
Generally, right before the audit. It's an end-of-year calculation. It's not before the audit, because that comes a little bit later, but it is before year-end. And that's when we would determine if we have a need for a supplemental budget that's brought to the city council in June of each year.
So you true up in June?
Yes.
If you've overestimated central services charge in its totality, and then you actually have under expenditures, everybody's central service charge drops?
The full charge is not imposed, so it remains within those different budgets as not transferred. And generally, that estimate, like you're suggesting, so in building this budget, we would estimate a year-end balance in the current year central service charge, what would be needed to balance the central service operations, and then we would adjust a charge for the balance of the year to target a beginning balance that we're anticipating carrying forward in the next year.
That sounded like a question from a bitter department head who had little control over the charges.
I've had to pay for services we did not receive.
Of course, never in this administration.
Not under this city manager.
Okay, Ray.
I'm going to infer that represents conservative budgeting, in that if you estimate high for an expense that you anticipate will come in lower, and your budget balances even with those higher estimates, that the net result is it's a conservative estimate and reflects well, I think, on the overall results.
Yeah, and that's the case. And of course, it's actually a financial policy of the city to estimate expenses liberally and resources conservatively, because the consequences of doing that are at the end of the year you have more money than you anticipated, rather than the much more negative consequence of not having enough money to pay your bills.
The only other thing I want to point out on street admin is 91288 and transfers out. This is going to the stormwater fund. Again, we'll see that in the stormwater. So that's an estimate of how much street maintenance work will be done in stormwater this year. So we'll see that when we get to the stormwater program budgets. And finally, Jeff gets to talk.
Yeah, I'm going to say something now, and I'll be fairly brief. So I have 5 capital budgets on pages 140 through 149. Really shouldn't be any surprises for you in these capital budgets. I'm not planning on going through them in any detail. There aren't any significant changes, and we've already reviewed the projects through the CIP process that we went through, beginning of April, I guess. The one thing I wanted to point out, and it's something that was pointed out through the CIP process as well, is that if you look at the ADA capital budget shown on page 149, we're building reserves to complete some larger accessibility projects out of that budget. But that doesn't mean we are making accessibility improvements next fiscal year. We're making improvements with our street and transit projects, which show up in other funds. And then we're making improvements through our community development programs and projects. So there are accessibility improvements being made. It's just this particular fund, we're building reserves to do a large project in the future. Do you have any questions on the street capital budget before we move into sewer?
Jeff, can you tell me which of the pedestrian crossings, because I don't have my CIP with me, which of those 2 crossings are you working on this year? I know
So we've got Counselor Kellum's favorite there by Bain Street and Les Schwab's that he's asked me about a number of times. We're kind of doing the back and forth, or we had been doing the back and forth with ODOT. Trying to recall where that's at in the process. This should go to construction this summer, this fall. We've concluded that. In the CIP, we have some other crossings planned for next fiscal year with some that we'd be funding with some grant money. We have 2 crossings around Grand Prairie Park on Waverly and Grand Prairie, and I think we had a couple other ones on 34th Avenue, if I remember correctly. So there's several head crossings.
Okay,
that
I
are
wasn't
going
sure
in.
which ones that were, put forward, so, okay, thank you.
Which is other.
Which is
Which is other, yeah.
One where the same kid got hit twice.
I'm still looking for
Yeah.
Walmart.
All right, so moving on to sewer.
If I'm reading the previous page in your streets capital, you got $220,000 for stormwater master plan in street capital?
Yeah.
So actually, the street fund is contributing over $400,000 a year for stormwater functions.
That, I forget what the transfer is without looking, but.
It was.
It was 206.
206.
Yeah, and it's going to be more than that. One of the things I was going to note later is, so yes, you are correct. We have the transfer out, we have the stormwater master plan, that's still in that street budget just because it has been for the last couple of years as it's been inching along. But we also make stormwater improvements with our street project. We're replacing pipes with that, and those costs aren't yet pulled out. So when you actually zero in on just what are we spending on stormwater, the picture is bigger than what you see. We've been taking baby steps through the budgeting process over the last several years to try to be a little bit more transparent in what's sewer, what's streets, what's stormwater. So a few more steps left to take as we move
So
forward.
the ultimate decision for council is going to be to balance, are we going to continue a form of subsidy from the 2 operating funds? Or are we going to shift the total responsibility to the potential stormwater utility?
Council decision.
So, before you move on to sewer, question on the ADA. It's becoming a bigger and bigger deal. I mean, I won't go into details, but privy to some information on the national level and also on the state level. So it's I think imperative the city continues to do whatever we can. I mean, everybody recognizes there's not enough money to fix the whole city at once, but certainly we fix areas as they're part of other construction projects. A good example out there on 34th, with the new signals. Are we protecting ourselves or not maybe protecting, but documenting these instances so that we are showing a good faith effort? The reason I bring it up, and I don't know if it shows up anywhere in the budget, but if you look on page 148 and 149, all it says or indicates is we're building reserves for projects. Well, we're doing more than that because we are making improvements in areas as they're incorporated into other projects. So how is that reconciled or documented, or what do we have to show that we are making efforts other than just building funds?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we do it in a number of different ways. Specifically for this budget that we're looking at, the CIP affords us an opportunity to have a little bit more dialogue about capital projects and what we're doing and what we're not doing. So one of in the introduction to this, in the portion of the CIP that addresses this, there's an accounting of how many curb ramps have we replaced in the last 5 years and things like that. So there's an accounting there and some dialogue. We have what's referred to as an ADA transition plan, where you document the deficiencies within the city, and then you go and you try to reduce those over time. We're in the process of updating our ADA transition plan, and I know Ed Hodney's group has made a lot of advances in our public building facilities on the ADA front, and that'll show in that ADA transition plan by the list that was and the list that will be in this new document. Other than that, I can say one thing that I think Wes has been really integral in pushing forward is city-wide heightened awareness on ADA issues. He has been, I just don't think we would be where we are in Public Works or in Community Development if Wes hadn't pointed us in the direction of focused energy on addressing ADA issues. I think especially Gary Stutzman here, our building official, has been an amazing resource for people who come in from the building community, working with parking lots and those things. People aren't, the ADA requirements can pose a unique challenge for people on a project, and they can be frustrating. And Gary does a good job of working with those folks on a case-by-case basis and help them through that process. So across the board, I think we've came a long ways with really Wes's pushing over the last several years.
And Bill, and the other piece of this that I think is important that people understand is that the ADA is not, it isn't like there's an ADA enforcement agency. It's enforced when you get sued, basically. And the big thing that we've tried to do is listen to disabled people in our community when they say, we have a problem with a certain situation, a bus stop that's not accessible, a route that someone needs to take from their home to a store. And so the high priority projects have tended to be those that are causing real world problems for people in chairs, basically. And we try and catch the ones that we know need to be fixed but haven't necessarily been on somebody's radar screen at this point when we're doing projects. But again, one of the keys, I think, to avoiding problems is maintaining good relationships with disabled people in your community so that they're not unhappy with you and feeling that you're dragging your feet.
And the perfect example of what Wes described is we have the, I forget the name of the newer retirement home complex there close to the river, next to down by the post office and everything. We had a resident call the city one day and say, I can't get to City Hall because there aren't ramps on this intersection, and this intersection. Or I can't get to the post office was another one. And so we looked for available funds where we could justify it, and we went and we replaced it. That fiscal year. We've got another one we're working on that Councilor Kopsinski brought to our attention that we're going to be able to respond to, within a period of months. So Wes is exactly right. Complaint areas are prioritized and responded to by trying to pull pieces of funds together from wherever we can get them.
Thank you.
Question? Yes, there was talk about doing something with the intersection of Crocker and Gibson Hill, but according to page 141, it looks like that's been put on hold. Is that correct, or?
That was a topic of discussion at last night's council meeting, where the direction we see from council was that the council was actually a little split on the decision, but Mayor broke the tie for the decision to plan on, at this point, a roundabout to be installed at Gibson Hill and Crocker. Right now, there are not adequate funds to proceed with that project, and so our plan is to show that in the 5th year of the CIP document. And it's through that process, I'm sure it'll get talked about again in future
Because that's
CIP
kind of a
meetings.
dangerous intersection, isn't it? I think, anyway.
But there was discussion about that, about concerns with vision from the intersection, from some shrubs and the power pole. The direction from council included direction to try to work with the property owners and with the power company to see what options might be available to address the vision issue in the short term.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, moving on to sewer. Let's see, so sewer funds are on page 151 to 177. I'm just going to cover a couple highlights here, and then Chris will move into the operating budgets. Proposed sewer budget is nearly $40 million. Our annual debt service payments for our treatment facilities, which are our water reclamation facility, and Talking Water Gardens, are approximately $5.6 million. This represents about a third of our anticipated rate and SDC revenues that we receive on an annual basis. So a substantial amount of our revenues go to covering our debt payments for those significant capital investments that we've made recently. Chris mentioned earlier, the budget has been built with the assumption of a 3% rate increase in July of this year. That's down from the 6% that we thought we may need when we were doing our forecast last year. Council is going to be having their full report on sewer rates later this month. What it boils down to is the increase is necessary for us to proactively maintain our system and then start replacing the 25 miles of pipe that's at risk of failing in the next 10 years. And we've talked a lot about that with council in different occasions, something we talked about through the CIP process. Council's also been hearing a lot about the capacity needs within the system, such as the needs to replace the Cox Creek sewer interceptor and the Riverfront interceptor. Again, as we discussed during the CIP process, we plan to start work on the Cox Creek interceptor during this next budget cycle, but we still don't have any short or long-term plans for funding the replacement of the Riverfront interceptor. That's something that staff will be coming back to talk with council about in the year. So our overall budget is up, and as we've been generating through more revenues through previous rate increases and looking for internal efficiencies, we've been able to get a lot more work accomplished year to year. We do still have some significant unfunded needs out there. I'll let Chris start off with operating budget.
Okay, we'll start on 152 with the wastewater treatment plant. On the actual budget sheet on page 153, I want to point out two things that you'll see repeated throughout several of the sewer and water operating programs that hopefully will head off some questions. On line 60216, this is software fees. Almost all of our operating budgets are going to have an increase in the software fee line for two reasons. One, we're replacing one of our main software programs that we use in operations for asset management, and we're going to the new version, so there's a little bit of a cost associated with that. We're also shifting the charge for software from being paid for all out of facilities maintenance budget, and we're moving it to the individual programs. They've allocated that based on how that program uses the software. So those charges have been allocated out to the individual water and sewer operating budgets. So a lot of them have 60 or 70% increases in software lines. We're really not spending that much more on software. It's just being spent in different places. The other change is line 66026, which is facilities engineering. This is that budget, facilities engineering and maintenance, and they charge back to the programs based on the work that they do for each program. It's very difficult from year to year to try to estimate how much time they're going to spend in each program. So in order to try to make our internal accounting a little more efficient, we've lumped all of these facility engineering charges into the admin budget. So when we get to wastewater admin, you'll see all of those charges summed there rather than dispersed. So we're doing the opposite thing. But it's really difficult internally to try to estimate those charges for each program from facilities maintenance. Again, we're not changing what we're doing on the ground. We're just changing where the numbers appear. And I'll point that out when we get to the admin budget line there. That's where that number will be. Otherwise, within this budget, just one thing I want to highlight for you in particular, lines 63006 and 63007, these are the electricity and the natural gas lines, and you'll see decreases in both of those expenditure lines. And this is a direct result of the energy management planning that we've been doing with the Energy Trust of Oregon, and Jorge has been managing that project. So we implemented some changes at the wastewater treatment plant last fiscal year, and we're seeing the results of that in a net decrease in our use of those resources. We're currently working through the same system with the water treatment facility, so hopefully next year's budget will see similar decreases on water treatment energy usage. That's right.
Going up that page on item 60254, solids process improvements, is there a light at the end of the tunnel?
There is, and it's not a train. So, I don't think.
Very good.
This fall, we should have the final report with our preferred alternative for the solids process at the treatment plant, and then we'll start the process of design for whatever that is. So, we're getting there.
So you're using telephone a lot more, though.
Yeah, so what has happened there is we actually are using iPads a lot more and portable devices within the plant. And so, but it goes through Verizon is our carrier, and so it shows up in our telephone bill. It's not really a telephone charge, but the data packages we need show up there.
How long has it been since you went out for bid on your cell?
I don't know.
Is
that a citywide? Jorge?
We haven't gone up for bid that I recall. There are some pretty good sized differences, excuse me, in system charges. It might not be a bad idea to investigate.
Yeah, we get, for example, what Chris was describing, the data plans are about $45 a month, and it's unlimited data.
Mhm.
So that's a pretty good deal to get unlimited data for $45 a month. Verizon provides is vastly superior than the other carriers around. That because to save some money and be reliable network than, in my experience, than what we see with T-Mobile is going for us.
Okay, so moving on to wastewater collections on page 154. On the program narrative, I do want to point out under the performance measures section, volume of sanitary sewer overflow. You'll see in the current year we had 1.68 million gallons of sanitary sewer overflows. This is directly related to what Jeff was talking about with the Riverfront Interceptor project. Because of the capacity problems in the interceptor, when we get a decent-sized rainstorm, we have overflows at our constructed overflow points. So they're what we call controlled overflow because they're going out where we want them to go out, but they're occurring at lower than the permitted rainfall amount in our discharge permit. So they're actually permit violations. And I just point that out for council's consideration because as we talk about the Riverfront Interceptor project, every winter we have overflows, and at some point those permits violations might catch up to us. So it just makes us a little anxious within Public Works to try to get a solution to that Riverfront Interceptor project. The collections budget itself, and poor collections, it shows up on their program narrative, and I don't know why. So collections budget itself is largely unchanged. You'll see a decrease in personnel expenditures. That's really because those expenditures are transferred over to stormwater based on what we anticipate that work to be done. Other than that, not a whole lot different in wastewater collection. Wastewater admin. Again, this program provides funding for things that go across the sewer programs. So you'll see down at the bottom, 66026, $937,000. These are the accumulated charges that facility engineering was charging to the individual programs that I mentioned have been gathered up and put here so that it's easier internally for us to account and estimate those charges. Similarly, we've done the same thing with 66029, which is water quality charges.
So how do you know what your cost of facility maintenance by facility is if you've got it all documented in admin?
It's still coded through project accounting codes, but the charge goes to wastewater admin. So they're still breaking their work out by lift stations, treatment plant, etc., but the charge is going to wastewater admin. So we could break it back out and see what they're doing for each program. But it's at the end of every budget year, we end up having to reconcile these numbers because we're never right on estimating. Next year, we think the mechanics will spend most of their time at the treatment plant. Wrong. They end up spending it in lift stations, so it's always wrong every year. So we try to put it here, so we're like, in sewer, we think they're going to spend this much money, to make it a little more easy internally to try to account for that. The other thing, line 91288, the transfer out, $696,000, similar to the street admin fund. This is going to stormwater for stormwater work.
Chris, 61022 credit card fees.
Yes, sorry, I had that highlighted. So these have been moved to the utility billing budget. These are fees that the city pays for credit card payments at the counter or on the phone. And we thought it was more appropriate that they be paid out by the utility billing budget, as all the other credit card fees are. So you'll see that when we get there. Next, we have water reuse and biosolids. This program is not very big, but we're keeping it because when we do have the solution, this is where those expenditures will show up. So rather than cancel this program and create a new one, we're leaving it and just carrying it forward. Talking Water Gardens. One main note here, the 61021 for testing. We are requesting $30,000 next year. This is actually based on what we've actually spent in 14-15 and what we think we're going to spend in 15-16. We keep thinking we're done with the testing, but we apparently aren't. So we're just trying to make this a real number that matches what we're doing.
You say ask for 30,000?
30 in 61021, line 61021.
Because it says 23.9.
Page 161.
Are you on page 161?
163.
Okay.
Never mind.
Okay. Yes.
Chris, are we still having to replant the plants that didn't fare so well?
Yeah, so that's a performance measure, I think, the shade plant coverage. So we actually, we measure in August of every year, and we were at 65% last summer, which was a great improvement. And we're hoping to get to 80%, which is very, very close to our operating level. So, yeah, this time of year right now, if you go to the wetlands, the water level is quite low. They've replanted a bunch of cattails, and they give them a start, and then when it gets hot, they'll raise the water level back up.
Is that the maintenance grounds line item?
No, so maintenance grounds, I have a note. Next year, we're going to be doing some grading of the road that goes into Talking Water Gardens and the road through Talking Water Gardens. And we also are doing significant path maintenance, both just general maintenance and also trying to improve it for ADA accessibility.
And our plans for the bridge are?
Not looking good. Even if Lynn County's supplies the bridge decking, we're over, I want to say 1.3. I just did this number, you remember? Yeah, so, pretty significant investment.
And does the railroad still access their facility through our property?
Yes.
And we charge them for that?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know
Do
if
they
there'd
have
be an LID opportunity.
Do they have an alternative route?
There was one.
No, we tried to, my understanding is we tried to get them to develop an alternative route, and they did not want to do that at the time, and so they still go through the middle of the wetlands.
Seems to me like you got choice A or choice B.
We had a great collaborative effort with Benton County, if I recall, with Belmont, when that issue came up. And it was it was supposed to be a short term, but it lasted a couple of years. It could almost be permanent. Could a similar type of a thing be done in lieu of a quote-unquote bridge?
Not in this instance, no. Lynn County had looked at it. This used to be a Lynn County bridge. It's now a Millersburg bridge. Lynn County had looked at it previously, and they were very gracious and provided us all their information so that our staff could do an estimate. And they're in, just like Benton County, they're in the business of doing bridges, and their least cost estimate was over $1 million as well. Nobody's came up with a low cost.
Are there federal bridge monies still available?
I couldn't tell you.
You know, something, because since we've got matching dollars for it, that helps.
Yeah, the challenge is if you're gonna go after bridge money, do you do it there, or you do it somewhere that's a lifeline route for emergency services, that it's not on a bridge that's not seismically sound? You probably have a lot of different competing needs throughout town, and so, where's the best one to go after if funds were identified? There's probably a council discussion to be had around that.
You might have a hard time getting the railroad to pay for anything, seeing as how they've been there for, I don't know. I mean, we bought the land around them and underneath them that used to be Simpson, and Simpson let them. I mean, they were part and parcel of Simpson's movement of raw materials in and finished materials out, so.
I don't know what options are maybe under an LID or not, but I can't imagine they're just going to willingly hand over a large sum of money.
Yeah, in my recollection, when the wetlands were designed, it was understood that we were required to provide access to the railroad because I believe they had easements or whatever that factored into the overall design. Admittedly, this is going back a few years, but I don't believe we have the ability to just, set up a toll booth or charge them for it unilaterally. Yeah. But I would point out, while it's gotten a little attention because of a blog posting on the subject, the bridge is serviceable. I mean, it's functional, and as Jeff points out, it's really serving a pretty limited purpose right now. I think maybe its biggest drawback is aesthetic rather than practical at this point. And the question is, do we want a pretty bridge? I mean, we could probably pretty it up for a lot less money, and it would be fine for the uses that it gets. I mean, we're not running trucks across it as a rule, and even the railroad, I think most of their stuff is fairly light. They did, again, this is into the dim recesses of memory, but my recollection is that they had to stop using it for certain purposes. They had a very heavy piece of equipment that they haven't been able to get that way. In fact, I think maybe they have to bring it in by train now, one of their track maintenance pieces of equipment. So, again, it's probably not an urgent need, but one that...
But again, it's a Millersburg bridge, and we just happen to be one of the prime users of it.
We'll be coming back to the Joint Management Committee as was requested of us.
Okay, pre-treatment, page 162. This is the program that provides the federally required permitting for our significant industries in town. It's a pretty stable budget. Again, their software line is going up quite a bit. This is actually, they have unique software that's for pre-treatment programs. They're buying the new version and a new module for that, so that's that increase there. Otherwise, pretty stable budget. That's it for the operating budgets. Any other questions on those?
Question on the revenue that covers the industrial pretreatment, do we recover that 100% of our expenses from our permit fees?
No, we only recover the DEQ fee that we pay for industrial permits. We now charge the industries the actual fee that we pay. The city has to pay DEQ per permitted industry. We recover that from the industry, but the other program costs, we don't recover.
It's paid for out of general sewer revenue?
Yes.
All right, capital budgets. Starting on page 165, a series of 4 capital budgets. Again, the projects that are shown here are consistent with our CIP discussions. They're centered around replacement of failing pipes and expanding capacity in the Cox Creek Interceptor, which serves a large area east of I-5. So it's going to help support development activities east of I-5, for those of you that aren't aware of what it serves. Let's see, equipment replacement's the only budget here that's not part of the CIP process, so if you have questions on that one, Chris will need to respond to those. I just want to draw your attention to the SDCI budget. What page? Yeah.
170.
170?
170, 171?
Yep. The details are on page 171. So over the last couple of years, we've been relying on SDC reserves in the debt service fund budget, the one we're going to talk about next, so not this one, in order to cover in order to cover SDC's share of the debt payments for our treatment facilities. What you see here this year is a substantial increase in the transfer from SDCI over to that debt service budget. And that's because those are reserves that we had built in that other fund have been exhausted, and so now we're transferring the full amount from this budget over to the budget that makes the debt payment. And you can, so it's the very last line from the bottom of page 171. It transfers out. That's why that increase is what it is. And that's going into the debt service budget on page 175, where you see it as a transfer in, about a third of the way down the page. So as I said at the introduction to the sewer discussion, our annual debt service payment is about $5.6 million. 1.4 million of that is currently SDC's responsibility. We've been living off SDC reserves for several years in order to make these payments, but our annual SDC revenue doesn't come close to matching what SDC's responsibility is for the payments. So what that means is, once we run out of reserves, we're going to have to start using rate money to cover debt's share, it's the second time I've done that, SDC's share of the debt service payment. That has a couple different impacts. One is we either have to, in order to get the same amount of work done on an annual basis, we either have to consider additional rate increases beyond those that we're already talking about, or we're going to get less work done because we don't have that rate revenue available to do all the things that it was originally designed to do. So we're not there yet, but we will get there, and it's a discussion that we're going to have to continue to have with council as part of our annual utility rate discussions. But again, nothing that's impacting this year's budget directly, but a little forecasting of what's ahead.
2 cents as well. When the projections were made about what percentage of the costs, the total costs, would be carried by SDCs, growth was really robust. We're not going to see enough of a recovery to make up for those years when we didn't collect the SDCs because the economy was so poor. However, we are seeing an improvement. So the gap, while it's concerning and it's going to have a real impact on us, as Jeff described, there is potential, well, it is getting better, and there's potential for it to get even better yet. So it becomes a question of the degree of the problem that we're really going to be wrestling with. And it's serious, but hopefully less serious than we were thinking about 2 or 3 years ago.
And the order of magnitude, if you had to fund the full $1.4 million that's here out of rates, would be about 7 to 9% on the existing rate base.
150 for each percent, 150,000 for each percent.
Chris, can I ask you a question? On page 166, just wondered what the, it says on 43,200, the Albany sewer service charges went up, I figured to go up 42.83%. I just wondered, what would that be due to?
Oh, that's me.
That's you, yeah.
Where are we
Sewer system capital. So really, what this is, so rate revenue goes to capital and to operating. So what is happening here is that the split going to capital is going up for next year. So at the total rate revenue bucket, a little bit more is going to capital next year than went this year.
Okay, great, thanks.
You're welcome. I noticed that you have an extreme.
Next one, sewer economic development on page 176. We have a little bit of rate money being directed to this budget to maintain the desired reserve of $500,000. Included in this budget is the Lochner Road sewer project that council authorized in the middle of this current fiscal year in support of Snow Temps expansion project, and then the continuation of the elevation certificate program that council authorized for qualifying North Albany residents in response to new floodplain maps that are anticipated from FEMA that should be coming out later this year.
Are you getting quite a good response from property owners up in that area?
We did, both in participation and in gratitude for the program. We had, let's see, I made some notes here. We had 202 properties that we had identified as eligible based on the criteria that we had discussed. 118 of those folks decided to participate, so almost 60%. Of the people that didn't, it's likely that a large percentage of them, pontificating, I have no idea, but it's likely that a lot of those folks already had elevation certificates completed. I've heard stories from folks that were able to lower their floodplain insurance bill with the elevation certificate when we were hoping to just keep people close to what they were before through that process. So in some cases, it's worked out even better. I had people come up to my wife at the school she works at and say, yeah, it's worked out really great for us. So I feel really good that we were able to do that for folks and help people through it. Water? Okay. Water funds are on pages 179 through 205. Total water budget, approximately $26 million. As Chris mentioned before, they've been prepared with the assumption of a 3% rate increase that takes effect on January 1st, 2017. Similar to wastewater, at least on the capital side of things, we're working to stay ahead of the curve on perpetual life replacement, so replacing aging pipes, hopefully before they catastrophically fail. And we're actively conducting assessments and going through a prioritization process that folds into our CIP. We'll go with the operating budget.
Okay, water admin starts on 180. Similar to wastewater admin, this pays for needs that go across water programs. And also similar, you'll see the credit card fees, 61022, go to 0 for the same reason. And you'll see facilities engineering charges shoot way up. Again, as we discussed, they're being accumulated here in this program. Next we have canal maintenance, which is 182 and 183. In this budget, you'll see an increase in contractual services. This is to pay for some needed perpetual life maintenance and inspection service on the hydropower generator is the bulk of that increase. Again, software fees are going up, and equipment replacement is going up similarly to build funds to replace some new equipment we just recently purchased.
Question.
Yes.
$143,000 to repair, or a piece of it is?
A portion of it is. So, let's see. Most of the increase, so it's the same things that we do out of contractual service every year. The estimate for the engineering work is $22,000 for the hydropower generator.
This is something we get $70,000 in total revenue from?
Well, It depends on the year, but yeah, if you want to.
Yeah,
go for
I,
it.
looking, 13, 14, it was 120, but then down to 13 and 70,000, 70,000.
You're pointing out.
I'm pointing out that it looks like one heck of a loser, and why are we doing this?
And we are asking the same question. So,
Turn off the key.
unfortunately, it's not as easy as that. We have rang the bell on several fronts by going through this project, and so there are likely some things that we've started that we won't be able to get out of. We are going through a process as we speak here to try to identify what process we would have to go through if we chose to decommission, and what we would still be required to do, and what are the implications of that. We also have, to be fair to the other perspective, over the years, we haven't fully optimized revenue generation out of the hydro plant. Now, part of that we can't control, because some of the work we have to do at the time of year that we can be generating power. And we have to draw the canal down for, and therefore it doesn't work. And there's a number of other things I don't need to get into, but all that to say, it is something that is certainly on our radar. The staff time and the regulations tied to it are amazingly burdensome. I don't think there's any way we could have predicted it in advance, and it's all part of something that will be coming back to council for more discussion.
Second question. What's the height of fall between the top of the head gate and the outlet? I mean, what's the differential?
It's close to 35 feet.
Oh, okay.
A significant issue that Jeff is referring to
This is where he's looking at the
obliquely
revenues
is
being
there's
generated.
a substantial
from the
water
hydro
right question.
Reserve.
And we went through that in
But
the
then-
late
Somewhere else is buried what the cost is.
last decade, I guess. It's been over a decade, and it was a significant decision point when we were dealing with the headworks and the carriage water. People on council remember the question of carriage water and diversion to some of the other creeks, Cox Creek, Oak Creek. So it's not a matter of, can you reconcile the numbers? There's other intangible benefits that you have to consider.
That having been said, do they check how many days a year you have this thing in operation?
You have to report it.
We report that.
And if it's, gee, we didn't run it, you then lose your water right? I mean,
You have to use it once within, I'm switching gears here to my water rights hat. So municipal rights are different from hydropower generation rights, which are different from. So you have to use your hydro rights once within every 5-year period in order to not have your right subject to revocation. Now that is through the Water Resource Department, which is separate from what we report for hydropower generation to FERC, but that's.
Well, just looking at expenses, I mean.
Agree 100%.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll be listening as you come to council.
Okay, Vine Street, 184. On the program narrative at the bottom, this is where you'll notice the FTE goes up to 4. We're not adding people, we're just splitting our existing people equally between Vine and AM. So that's what that is. And the corresponding increase on page 185 in the personnel costs. So we currently use them pretty much equally between the two plants. It makes sense to split them equally between the two program budgets. Other than the software license change and the facilities engineering change, there's not a whole lot of difference in this budget. Water distribution, 186, 187. This program is fairly steady. Again, this is another program that is seeing a significant increase in insurance related to a relatively small claim we've compensated by working around that with some other lines within the water fund, so.
Our water loss now,
Oh, boy.
It's on one of the, I want to say it's 17, but down a lot from when it used to be. On the, Karen, do you remember what it is off the top of your head? 12. We've got better with our.
Darn, we're good.
yeah, that is a significant number, because we started in the high 30s. And I made a presentation one time to the Chamber Forum, and I think we're 37. And my comment was, there's not a business in this community that can afford to have anybody come in and take 37 cents out of every dollar out of their till. So this is it's a cost avoidance. It costs you money, but there's a long-term payback.
Oh, yes.
And that's the value of the pipe replacement program, and paying attention to these 100-year-old pipes that we've got holes all over the place. So, I really compliment staff for staying after that. American Water Works says 10%. If you have a well-run utility and tight, 10% is the target number, if I remember right.
That's what the whole nation's going through right now.
It is.
All the infrastructure.
The infrastructure's wearing out.
You
And,
bet.
we've been after this now for close to 15 years or more.
Yeah, there's been dedicated capital funding for the steel pipes, who are the first. Most of those have been taken care of. Our next classification of pipe to work on are the AC pipes. So we're working on a pipe replacement plan for that.
I remember listening to Jeff Kenny talk about your leak board. You had, well, it used to have 30-some, 40-some leaks on the board, and how many do you have, rolling?
I walked in 16 years ago, we had 100 leaks on the board. The system we stayed between 15, 16, 7, 8 years.
At 2.
2?
Wow.
Pretty good improvement.
Good job.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
super.
They do a great job.
Yeah.
Next, we have Albany-Millersburg Water Treatment Plant. Again, this time the FTE is dropping, sort of a false drop. And you'll see a corresponding drop in the personnel services. One of the things to point out is 66011, which is the line for equipment replacement. This represents dedicating funds to replace the membranes at the water treatment plant. So we're in the cycle now of replacing membranes, and we're trying to save funds for the next cycle of replacing membranes.
Millersburg, are we on I forgot the ratio, 90-10? 90% of the cost is ours and 10 is Millersburg?
I think that's right.
So when we do that, we take a look at our actual expenditures, and it goes back to the allocation of the facility and engineering charge. Do we back that number in there to calculate the 10% Millersburg?
So we create a bill quarterly for Millersburg, and it includes 10% of the total expenditures of this budget. And so every month, 1/12 of this will be shifted to equipment replacement, and so that goes into the
But we've
quarterly
taken
bill.
facilities engineering charges out of here. And you put them over in your administration. And so you've got to back that number in there somewhere.
Oh, that's a good point. Just going to write that down.
Yeah. Well, they're looking at.
I think that we'll still do that through the project accounting. Oh, yes, because the way we do facilities engineering charges is via the work order system. They're probably all sitting back there mentally telling me this. So we generate work orders for Millersburg, and those go as part of that quarterly bill attachment, so that the work order system and the project accounting associated with that will generate the cost for Millersburg. Thank you, my telepathic friends. Okay.
Question for you?
Yes.
A recurring theme this evening is insurance and bonds going up significantly, yet on this page, 189, it's going down. Why up for everybody else in quadruple numbers and this one's down? I just would have thought everything
We have one program
goes
where
up.
it goes to zero. I don't know the answer for that. The way it's allocated across the program budget, Stuart could probably give a more intelligent answer. It's based on, absent a claim number, the portion that doesn't go, isn't divvied up based on the number of claims or the proportion of claims. That portion of the liability premium is divvied up based on total program, relative total program costs. So if this program budget is down this year over previous years, then their insurance charge will go down because they haven't had any claims. Okay, Jeff.
Must have nailed it, Stuart, put the mic down.
So we have sewer SDC budgets, pages 190 through 193. Reserves are small in these budgets. We're transferring debt payment out of SDCI, and then we're conducting one maintenance project along the canal out of SDCR. It's a project that we reviewed through the CIP process. I'm going to try to move things along. You guys can please interrupt me if you want me to stop. Water debt service, page 194, 195. Payment schedules on page 194. Depending on how much development we see, it is possible that rates will have to start paying some of SDC's share of this payment, similar to sewer. If that does happen for water, it's not going to be as significant amount as it is for sewer. It's really not, while it won't have went as planned, it's really not going to impact our ability to get work done. It's just not of the same scale. So again, just something to be aware of. Water capital, 197 through 199. Just as you saw in the CIP. Water Eco Devo, 200 201. We have a small amount of rate revenue coming into this fund to maintain the desired $500,000 reserve. The only project here is continuation of a council authorized project to help a group of customers bring their backflow devices into compliance, which helps protect our water system. That project just carries over. North Albany Water Capital Projects, 202, 203. This budget is used to fund capital projects outside the UGB in North Albany. So customers out there were previously served by the North Albany County Service District. City of Albany took it on. Those customers pay an additional capital charge on their water bills to fund replacement of those lines. And so that money is collected and put into this fund, and we use it to do projects specific to that area. We are building reserves. The next two priority projects out there are significant in expense, so we're building our reserves in order to get after those projects. Equipment replacement?
Equipment replacement budget, 204 and 205. We're using existing water equipment replacement funds for three purchases. One is replacement membranes for the AM water treatment plant that we'll replace in the next fiscal year. We're replacing 947, which is the water distribution Vector truck. So it's used daily. It's an expensive piece of equipment. And then we're replacing a service truck that the treatment plant has that's pretty much at the end of its useful life. And that's it for water. Are there any questions overall in water? Okay, moving on to stormwater. So this is a new fund. It's fund number 625. It does not create any new revenue sources. It's just gathering existing revenues and expenditures in one place. Let's see. So stormwater revenues there were moved over primarily from sewer and street admin funds, and there's a little bit of permit fees revenue as well. We have stormwater operations on page 208 and 209. All of this was built using the information that has in previous years been contained in the wastewater collection and street maintenance budget pertaining to stormwater operation functions. So we just pulled that all over and created this program narrative here.
Chris, how if it's a new fund and never has existed, how can the insurance go up? I mean,
so what we did, so the way we
you just kind of divide it and bring it over?
We multiply a percentage by the general lines and move it over. Okay. Because we do 15% of our time is in stormwater, so we multiply those general lines by 15% and move it over. So it reflects what happened in those base budgets.
Okay, great.
So this budget is prepared, one, we don't show any personnel because we use an accounting process.
That's right.
To back charge this fund.
Right.
And the level of work anticipated is a continuation of existing level?
Yes.
And not the anticipation of a new permitted level?
Yes. So we did not anticipate having permit-required activities in the next fiscal year. So the level of work that was used to create these budget estimates is based on the last few years' level of work in stormwater.
And so depending upon how successful we are in negotiating with DEQ, we may or may not make that happen. And depending upon what that negotiation is, the magnitude of the future can be variable.
Sure. When we get the permit, which will happen in the near future, there will be a significant increase in the amount of work that needs to be done. The amount of that depends if the permit is more reasonable or less reasonable for us.
Give my standard plug, that it also doesn't provide for any asset management of our pipe system, any replacement of failing pipes other than what we're doing with association with the street project. So much unlike we had to catch up on the sewer side over the previous 5 to 7, 8 years, we'll have to go through that. Council will need to decide if they want to go through that process on the stormwater side as well.
The number you brought before council was $100 million in assets out there that we do not have a funding source for replacement.
There's more than $100 million in assets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Other than the pieces that we put together when it's a street project.
Correct.
Or something that fails.
Correct.
Because that's what this money is.
So the stormwater operating budget just reflects a continuation of what we've been doing the last few years in our forecast for next year. Next, we have stormwater admin. Similar to water and sewer admin, it's set up the same way. We haven't had an admin budget before, so there's no previous expenditures there, but this will provide permitting support, engineering support, those sorts of things across all the stormwater programs. And then there's stormwater capital.
Yeah, on the capital side, we already talked about it. We don't have undedicated funding source. We don't have standalone planned stormwater projects, but we are building some with our streets. The only other point I want to make on this is that what you don't see here that you see in the other utility budgets is an STC budget. So the city does not have stormwater STCs, much unlike many other communities throughout Oregon. So that'll be another future council discussion point once we can actually get the legs on the master plan update.
The last program in this stormwater fund is equipment replacement. And again, we're just transferring over a percentage of the equipment that we use in stormwater to build funds for eventually purchasing dedicated equipment for the stormwater program.
Maximum utilization by equipment number. So a Vector that gets used, do we know if we're 70% utilization or are we at 95?
I don't know off the top of my head. I will tell you that we use the sewer Vector trucks every day. If a Vector truck is down, we struggle to find work to do. We have to completely change what the crew has planned to do. So we use Vectors in sewer and water every day. I would say it's got to be a really high percentage, but I don't know that number off the top of my head.
I would suggest that we might consider a way of tracking utilization by equipment, so at some point, we're going to have to add to the fleet.
Mm-hmm.
And when utilization gets approaching a threshold, it's time to make that consideration.
We do know through the work order system how many hours our equipment is spent on stormwater activity or sewer activity, and I don't remember the number, but maybe Kristen can tell me what the number is that so we take that percentage and we multiply it by for instance, the equipment replacement of the Vector, and we moved that much money over. Do you remember what the percent was for equipment? Right, so we could calculate how much percent of the time the Vector or the TV van or whatever is used for storm versus sanitary.
Well, I think you're talking about just the physical wearing out of the equipment, aren't you?
Well, both wearing out and when
we effectively have 3 sets of crews: water crews, sewer crews, storm crews, and I guess 4, the street crews. And sometimes we're all trying to use the same backhoe or groups of backhoes or the backers. And you have to make a decision, are you renting equipment when you have maximum utilization, or do you have to step up and buy, I don't know what a backer rents?
$400,000.
$400,000. So you've got to know what your utilization is in order to know how to make your investment. You know, we might go to whatever the local Vector folks are,
see what
and
kind of a
rent
deal
from
they
them.
make.
Paying overtime periodically versus hiring somebody.
Well,
I think that's just something we need to be watching in the future.
It is also a function of what the perception is. Because right now, there's the perception by a few folks out in Albany land that the stormwater utility wants to go out with a credit card and throw money at a whole bunch of equipment and a whole bunch of new people and a hierarchy from just underneath the city manager all the way down with 17, and I thought you folks did a pretty good job when you came before us and came before the council to point out that, no, we're going to use the stuff we've got, and it's going to be shared, and it's going to be, but that didn't get into heads of some folks out there. And when we start talking about the equipment, they need to understand that's when we need equipment is when we get equipment. We're not going to go buy a bunch of equipment just so we have it sitting there.
Yeah, we have a long history of sharing equipment
Yeah.
between water, wastewater, street,
But
and so that's
in-
what would happen.
In
Until it
the
became
interest of making it even
unpredictable.
more clear for those folks who are watching now, that is in fact the system.
Sure.
It's waiting until it's needed, not just going and buying a bunch of stuff.
No, there's no way. Okay, that's the end of the stormwater fund. And then we're going to move on to, we have to do facilities replacement. I always mess this up, so I have to turn back in my book just a second. Pages 216 and 217. This is the program where it receives money from each of the Public Works funds, and we accumulate that money and then do improvements at operations, primarily for facilities that benefit all of the programs. So our current project is building a new crew building at operations. It's underway. It's expected to be complete end of May, beginning of June. So there's a little bit of money carried over next year for any necessary expenses that may go across the fiscal year, but that project is just about done. Any questions on that? Okay.
Okay, internal services fund. Everyone can breathe a sigh of relief. We're almost done. Almost done. And Gary and Bob have been waiting for CD. CD is going to go fast, I promise, when we get there. So, we have 6 internal services funds. These programs provide services across several different funds and are supported by charging the people that they are providing those services to back so that they get essentially reimbursed. The first 2 are ones that I manage. First one's Public Works Admin on page 218 to 19. This is the budget that contains all of the admin staff for the Public Works Department and the Community Development Department. Second one is Engineering Services on pages 220 to 223. Really, the only significant monetary change here is due to the addition of 1 employee that was authorized mid-year this fiscal year by council. So far, we've done 2 recruitments for that position. We've been unable to fill it. We plan to post again this summer. We're hopeful we'll be able to attract someone who's capable of filling that position, but so far we haven't been successful. Any questions on those 2 before Chris moves on to Ops Admin?
Okay, Ops Admin provides overarching support for all of the programs at operations. We're going down by 1 FTE. This is not a loss of FTE. It's moving over to the facilities engineering budget, which we'll get to at the very end. Otherwise, this budget is largely the same. And then we have Water Quality and Control Services, which is 226 and 227. Again, they work across several different programs. They provide laboratory support, outreach and education. Yes, sir.
Just one item, 61030, personal auto reimbursement.
Yeah. So that is, it's always been in the budget, and that's to pay for use of personal auto when a fleet vehicle isn't available. So, for instance, I don't have a city car. I make trips back and forth to City Hall all the time, out of town for meetings, so that's what that budget line is there to cover.
But it looks like it's just an overestimate, just anticipation in case it's necessary.
Well, I've started to use that line in the current year, and so it's the estimate for what we thought we would see for next year.
Doing a lot of driving.
I drive a lot. Water quality control, again, this is a very stable budget, and the expenditures, the personnel in this budget actually do a lot of work in the stormwater, outreach and education, spill response, et cetera. So another budget that charges back to the stormwater fund, and we would expect to see more as our stormwater work picks up. Jeff?
All right, customer service budget. This is for utility billing on pages 228 to 229. UB manages over 17,500 accounts, and Patty and her group do a wonderful job, and they often have to deal with difficult situations, and so I feel like I need to recognize them, and that I have a great deal of appreciation for the work that they do. It's not easy work. There really aren't any significant changes in the UB budget other than the $56,000 in UB-specific credit card fees that Chris previously mentioned that used to be in water admin and sewer admin, and now we've relocated here because they're, again, for people who are paying via credit card, over the phone, or at the counter. There's also a notable increase in our cost for online account management. That's been a theme year after year, and that's primarily driven by the fact that more people are signing up for online account. We're charged per transaction, so it's a sign that that program is being successful. Any questions on the UB budget?
With the online, has our uncollectibles gone down?
I'd need to ask Patty.
Okay, facilities maintenance and engineering, 230 and 231. We've already talked about this program a lot, off and on. On the program narrative there at the bottom, you'll see an increase of 2 FTE. This is a transfer in of 1 FTE from ops admin, which is the inventory specialist, and the requested addition of a new FTE in the facilities automation and control, or the SCADA work group. As a result of all those changes, the personnel budget is going up by over 13%. The other thing to note here is 60216, whereas everyone else's software fees went up, this is where they're all going down, so this is how it balances, and we're not actually spending significantly more on software. This budget is spending quite a bit less. And that's it for internal services. The last thing we have is grant funds, 2 grant funds, and we're almost done. So pages 232 through 234, I have to get back there again. It's numbered differently. So first we have the FAA grant. Remember way back when we talked about the taxiway design project, this is where that is. So this is the program that receives the grant funds from the FAA. FAA grant-funded projects are funded with a 90-10 match rate. So we are hoping to get the taxiway design done this year. We also included the taxiway construction just in case those funds are available and we get there, but we don't really anticipate that we will, but just in case it's in here, so we have the authority in case we can make that much progress.
The consultant will complete the airport master plan?
I just signed it the other day. I just signed the maps, and it's coming to council sometime soon.
You've already been reviewed by FAA?
Yes, that's where it got stuck. The very, very last program is the Title 19 grant, and it's probably last and least. So it's a very small program, but it helps provide funding to paratransit. This is reimbursement we receive for the paratransit program providing non-medical rides to Medicaid recipients. So every time we provide that ride, we can request reimbursement from the Medicaid program, and that comes into this budget. It, by law, cannot be part of the paratransit budget, so it's here. It's a relatively small amount of money, but it does help with our paratransit program. And that is all for Public Works. Are there any other questions for us? Thank you for your patience.
That's all. That's all. Let's see, the 17 questions.
Sorry, I was
Yeah.
hoping we'd be done by 9, but didn't make it.
Do we want to take a quick restroom break before I do DD, or?
I just want to say you guys did an excellent job.
Oh, thank you.
Every question you answered, and I'm just very impressed with the way you presented it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have just 2 more sections on the agenda for tonight, the community development, and then libraries, if we can hang in there. Okay. All right.
Want me to just get to it?
Mhm.
You want to get home? Okay.
As the 300 people from Public Works leave.
That's right.
Barry, I'm going to do it to you again.
My alarm
Mass
goes off
exodus
at
going
4:30,
on.
so yours probably goes off all night. Yeah.
That's at 6 o'clock. 4:30. Oh, my God.
Throw some water on there.
I just did you for 2.5 hours.
They look a lot like the last two.
They were going to be through by 9. Looks like they're gonna start.
Anyways, has a joke or something. Finishes. He doesn't want to know Can't even
Thank you.
All right, thank you for allowing us to continue. I'll try to, now I'm really loud. I'll try to keep us moving along. So you would have all just received a copy of the PowerPoint presentation and the summary sheet. The summary sheet's something we've done for the last several years. It's just kind of a very generic overview. I'm going to give a short introduction here. We'll go through same type of presentation for the slides. It's very short, and then we'll get into the budget details. So we have 2 divisions within the Community Development Department: Planning, which is led by our Planning Manager, Bob Richardson, and Building, which is led by our Building Official, Gary Stutzman, and they're there. And they've been responsible for putting their respective budgets together, so if you guys ask really difficult questions, they're probably going to be the ones to answer, but I usually like to test myself and see if I can answer them, so at the risk of giving a wrong one, just don't laugh at me. As a whole, the department continues to see an increase in development activity. We've seen an increase in the number of land use applications and an increase in the number of people coming in for what we call pre-application meetings. So it's an opportunity for people to get information before they actually submit an application. It's a good indicator of what's ahead for us. We've also seen a slight increase in the number of building permits over the previous year, with a significant increase in the value of what's being constructed under those building permits. So in 14-15, we had a total value of permits issued of $76 million. That's up from $60 million in the previous year. So I think it's good news that people are investing that type of money in the Albany community. But responding to this increase in activity over the last few years has been a real challenge for us. You'll recall that we went through some significant staff reductions during the recession. And we're now to a point where we really need to start considering adding back some capacity into these work groups. And we've started to do that on the building side of things. Council recently in this fiscal year authorized the addition of a new building inspector position. So far, we've been unable to fill that position after extended recruitments. We also had a building inspector leave the city earlier this year, and we've had a hard time filling that position as well. Fortunately, the building staff is a really close working group. They're a very hard working group, but right now they're just really taxed, and we need to really be concentrating on filling these positions. We had a recruitment close last Friday, and we'll hopefully be going through interviews here shortly. There were also reductions on the planning side during the recession. None of that capacity has been restored yet, despite the demand for it. Right now, it's really all staff can do to keep up on current planning applications and manage some of the programs that we have, like the Community Development Block Grant Program or floodplain management activities that we have to do. Similar to building, we're very fortunate in that we have dedicated and very capable planning staff that's been keeping us afloat. But really, we haven't been able to do too much more than survive right now. I don't feel like we have been able to adequately respond to some of the requests from the Planning Commission, the council, or accomplish some of the activities that I know Bob and I would both like to accomplish in order to better serve our development community, exercise some efficiencies throughout the department. Now, our visions are always, hopefully we're always looking ahead, and our goals exceed our means to accomplish them. But while I feel like we're bringing high-quality work forward, when we bring it forward, I don't feel like our response times are adequate, despite our desire to have them be adequate. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move ahead. So I'm going to go ahead and start with a slideshow here, provide this overview of the department, what we do, how we do it, and any changes that are proposed in this year. I put this picture on here this year. This isn't all of our community development staff. This is who was around one morning when I decided to take the picture. But I thought it was important to put faces on the department. So we do a lot of looking at the numbers through the budget process, and it's easy to lose sight of the fact that these are the folks that are making things happen. And you know, I've been in my current position in this capacity for about a year now, if you include the interim time. I've had an opportunity to get to know the staff in a different way than I had before, and I just have to say that I've been really impressed with the work ethic of these folks and the quality work they turn out, and their desire to serve the city. And I just felt like I needed to make that point tonight because they've really impressed me over the last year. All right, so as I mentioned, we have two divisions in CD, building and planning. I'm going to talk briefly about both of them. On the planning side of things, they're responsible for development review, long-range planning, floodplain management, historic preservation, code enforcement, and CDBG stands for Community Development Block Grant Program Management. A little bit more about planning workload. Among other activities, in 2015, the planners processed 60 land use applications. Some of those are dealt with at a staff level, others go to the Planning Commission, and some go to council. Land use applications, depending on what they are, they can be very complex, very controversial, and very time-consuming. They held 80 pre-application meetings with developers. These are free meetings offered to developers, so they have an opportunity to come in and learn about what might be required of them with a proposed development activity. Those meetings we have planning staff, building staff, fire department staff, and public works staff. So people have a lot of resources at their disposal for free before they start investing money in a specific development. We also have a planner available for consultation at the counter, 8 to 5 every business day. Bob, even as the planning manager, is on that rotation so that his staff is afforded enough time to keep up with their planning work. Building side, Plan review, inspections, ADA compliance is talked about during the Public Works presentation. We have code enforcement activities for building code issues, and then also a big role in emergency response. Building workload, almost 2,400 permits issued last year, shy of 10,000 inspections performed, and as I said before, 76 million in new construction. And they just like planning, 8 to 5 every business day, available to help folks at the counter. Yes, sir.
A few years back, I remember there was some software that made it so you could share plans between your staff all at the same time, rather than having to have the big bundle go from one guy to the next. Is that part of the efficiency that's made it possible to keep your numbers as lean as they are, but still be efficient?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a factor that plays into all of that. You're referring to e-plans or electronic plan review process. I think it's been a very successful implementation. It's widely used. I think we're able to do a better job with our reviews and do them faster and more efficiently. We expanded on that a little bit last year to we bought some additional software that works similar to that and with that, where we can, the building inspector can take tablets out in the field and they can do their inspection reports real time, so people in the contractors can get real-time results rather than having to wait till the end of the day for the inspector to get back and input it. Big cost saving, time savings on the side of the inspectors. I think when Gary was doing the calculations last year, when he was looking at just mileage, not even anything else, but just recording mileage, it had a payoff in 1 year's time. So I think a combination of things that Gary's been able to do on his side, and and Wes likes to point this out too, and Gary deserves every bit of this credit. Gary's doing a job now that 3 people used to do. Certainly there's some things that aren't getting as much attention, but he runs a tight ship and he does a really good job, and he's been able to rebuild his reserve in the building budget, which we'll talk about. He's just done a fantastic job, and he really deserves to be commended for it.
What's the level of implementation for both building and planning?
E-plans is now 100%, so we have engineering, planning, and community development, and fire, I believe. Fire using E-plans, yep, so that's fully implemented. Mobile office, that's getting close. So that's been, this year we've purchased the software and been working on getting that implemented with Jorge's staff, with Terry Hayes, who's put a lot of effort into that and was instrumental in E-plans, so it's on its way.
I spoke to the county about it last year, and I guess maybe a little bit of the year before, and I understand now they're in process of doing it themselves.
Oh, good.
I kind of volunteered staff through Wes, if they wanted to talk to them about it, because it would be something that might do them some good. Anyway, thank you.
One thing that I think's been beneficial from an interdepartment perspective with implementing these programs is we've been able to work real closely with Jorge and his staff on these are not simple programs to implement. And his staff has done a wonderful job. If I ever buy a car, I'm going to have Jorge come and do the negotiations for me, because when he's negotiating contracts, he's a bulldog. So it's just been nice to build those relationships and leverage some of the resources that the other departments have to do, or that have to offer, rather than try to do it ourselves and not do as good of a job as could be done. So a lot of successes surround those programs. Okay, so how do we do it? Planning staff, just over 6 FTE. We have to do our land use reviews within 120 days. That includes time for public hearings and appeals. We manage 3 commissions. The Community Development Commission is the newer one that is responsible for managing the community development block grant program. On the building side, just over 7 FTE, but as I mentioned, right now, we're at 5. We don't have 2 of those positions filled. Complete inspection with 24 hours of request. Residential plan reviews are completed within 10 business days, and we are self-supported on the building side by revenues generated from building permits. As I mentioned, Gary's been able to build up a healthy reserve back into that budget, and we're going to talk about how we're proposing to utilize some of that in just a moment. This next year, we're not proposing any changes in organizational structure. Both building and planning budgets anticipate the need to rely on some contract support. On the positive side, the general fund allocations to the planning division, we were able to be increased this year, but they weren't increased enough for us to be able to add back capacity. In other words, not enough to hire on another employee or add back an employee that we would have used to have had. And so our hope is that the revenue picture will continue to improve, and that next fiscal year we'll be in a position where we'll be able to request an additional staff person on the planning side. We're looking at total budget. We're just right around $5 million for community development. Planning makes up about $2 million of that, building about $3 million. That reserve that Gary's been building up, we're estimating will be at $1.1 million by the end of next fiscal year, and that's after making some contributions that we'll talk about.
Wasn't too long ago that we were running,
Almost to nothing. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that here in a moment.
300,000 a year.
All right, so we're gonna start with the detail sheets, or the detail budget line items. Similar to Public Works, I'm planning on keeping it at a high level, and you guys will interrupt me, please, if you want to stop and talk about something. So the planning budgets are on pages 236 and 237. We don't have any drastic changes proposed in this year's planning budget. I'm just going to call out a couple of lines that might have drawn your attention. First, you'll see we've used the additional general fund allocations to plan for some temporary help, shown on the second line down at $45,700, and for some additional contractual support from a consultant, where you see contractual services increase in the first line under materials and supplies. Another question generating line might be 66033, which is towards the bottom. This line is labeled as building inspection services. It shows a decrease of $27,000. And if you look at the columns, you'll notice that no money has been spent out of that line in this year so far to date. That amount should have really been zero in last year's budget, and it was an error. So the change what appears to be a change in this year's budget is merely a correction to what was in last year's budget. And that's a result in how a code enforcement position was budgeted, where it used to be budgeted all in one budget and charged back to the other, like we do in Public Works. That position is now split in 2 places. Any questions on the planning budget before I move to building?
One comment.
Sure.
One of the things that we consistently get brought to our attention is, as we develop new regulations, we often say, we need to adopt them, we can go back and review them and check them, and if they're not right, we can fix them. And probably the biggest discussion was Goal 5, when that came about. What I'm hearing Jeff say is, they're barely keeping our head above water, so our ability to go back and review those. My favorite one is skinny streets that I don't like, for public safety reasons and others, and we've not been able to go back and find out how well did those decisions work. And so if we're never reviewing our decisions that we make, we're not going to get any better.
If they don't have the employees, you can't do it.
Well, I like the swales, but the skinny streets where the bulb outs come in, I don't know.
Actually, this
Sometimes I run over, I do it.
school system doesn't like the skinny streets very well.
Well, we often, we're looking at downtown, some of the standards for downtown now. Well, we're doing it through a different mechanism. We did it with the Chamber of Commerce several years ago when we looked at some of our bottlenecks in the development process. And we came out with a positive result. We improved. And when we're just barely keeping our head above water and not adding back, we're not able to challenge ourselves and ask our own customers, were those good decisions or bad decisions?
We have a growing list of areas where we have conflicts in the development code between one section and the other, areas where we know we need to go back and clean things up. And we have a lot of areas where we think we have some opportunity to do things differently. Maybe have the same outcome with less burden for the developer. We have, it's one of the benefits of bringing someone like Bob in who's worked in different organizations, seen different ways of doing things. When we reviewed a land use application in Lebanon for potential impacts on the canal, their processes are drastically different. Their planning manager does trainings for the League of Oregon Cities. He wrote that stuff. He's good. So there's a lot of different ways to do things, and we'd like to, in addition to a number of other things that we think we would like to focus some attention on, we'd really like to go back and clean up the development code and look for efficiencies and look for ways to make the development process easier without letting go of the quality of the end product that we receive with the current development code. Building, pages 239 through 243. So the building budgets include building inspection and electrical permit programs. The state mandates that electrical be separated from the building program. Within the building inspection budget, there's a few lines I want to call out. I'm going to try really hard to not make this confusing. So first thing you notice is in the revenue section, revenues appearing to go away from building permit surcharges and new revenues coming in for GAPS, Greater Albany Public Schools, construction excise tax. And you'll also see related changes when you read down further on the expenditure side. The bottom line with these is that there's really no change in what's being received and what's going out. It's strictly a change in accounting practices in response to a request that we got from finance, but I'm assuming it came through our audit process. So again, we are still collecting both of these items, and we are still using them and passing them on to the appropriate party in the same way. The GAPS tax is collected and paid as shown in the budget, and then the state surcharge we collect on behalf of the state, and then we pass that on to them. And those, Stuart's going to have to correct me if I use incorrect terms, but they're tracked on what I think is called a balance sheet that's outside of this fund. So it's tracked and accounted for and reported, but it's done outside of this particular fund. Good? Bad? Close enough?
Right, they're on the balance sheet.
It's on the
You're on the
balance sheet.
balance sheet. You said the word balance sheet.
That's right, you're there.
The next revenue item that might have drawn attention is charges for services. Let's see, that's again, the elimination of these revenues is due to the change that we made in last fiscal year's budget. This is related to that $27,000 that I referenced in the planning budget used to go from planning into building, and it was shown as coming in here. So that's being corrected. And then last fiscal year, we also changed how erosion prevention sediment control permits are reviewed on the building side. And so now Public Works, who is responsible for the permits, it does those reviews. And so that all that correction is made in that line. The next item to note is that several of the increases you see on the expenditure side are a result of adding that one FTE mid-year this last fiscal year. And so we have another person that we're paying for, and so that trickles down through a number of places. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is what you see at the very end of the budget there, which is a $60,000 transfer out to police code enforcement. And this is getting to what Councilor Kopsinski raised a moment ago. Several years back, the general fund essentially bailed the building division out so we could keep the doors open and continue providing service through the city. There was a $300,000 bailout. It was not structured as a loan, but the building reserves now are healthy enough that both Gary and I decided that we wanted to reimburse the general fund for that payment that was, or that payment, for that that allotment that was provided to building at that time, and in hopes that if we ever get in a situation where we need it again, there'll be a track record that we're good for it, and we pay it back, even though it wasn't structured that way. As a whole, the city has a need for additional capacity and really a new approach for addressing code compliance. And this $60,000 is being coupled with a contribution from CARA to fund a new code enforcement officer in the police department. And so assuming that the building division can continue to afford this in the coming years, it's our intention to provide $60,000 a year for 5 years until we've paid back that $300,000. Are there any questions on the building budgets before we move on to grant funds? We have a couple grant funds to talk about. Okay. So the two grants are pages 244 through 247. We have the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG, and the State Historic Preservation Grant. CDBG budgets are shown on pages 245 and 246. So what happens here is, because the city's population is greater than 50,000, we're considered what's called an entitlement community, which allows the city to receive annual CDBG funding allocations through the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, as you've probably heard it referred to. We can use funds for administration, up to 20% of the funds, and for projects or programs that benefit Albany's low and moderate income residents, homeless, seniors, and other special needs residents. We have separate funds created for each of the activities, the admin and then the actual activities, because of limitations on how much can be spent on the admin side, so that's why we separate those out. The challenge, which I think is a fortunate challenge, is that we have to spend 50% of the funds each year in order to receive the future allocation. So we can't save 100% of the funds from year to year to year in order to build up for a big project. We can do that in pieces, but not holistically. But it means that it's really important for us to carefully track our expenditures. We used to have separate budgets for each year's money. You might remember there was, I think, 6 or 8 different funds for just the CDBG money last year, and it was getting really complicated. I didn't want to add 2 more pages this year, so I asked Jeff Babbitt to condense them into one admin and one activities budget. So what you see are a combination of new revenues and also carryover funds from previous years, and that's what you're seeing in the budgets. The proposed expenditures out of these funds are consistent with what's called a 5-year consolidated plan and a 1-year action plan that's went through the Community Development Commission, City Council, and then also through HUD. Our last grant is for historic preservation. It's on page 247. This money comes through the State Historic Preservation Office, or the SHPO. It's typically used for residential rehab grants on registered historic homes, and then several activities for public outreach in support of the Landmarks Advisory Commission. The state requires a 50% match of grant funds, which we typically rely on staff time and rehabilitation grant matching funds in order to meet that. And if we don't spend this money, it goes back to the state. So we don't like to give money back, so we make a concerted effort to spend it. The one item that's different in this year's budget is that the Landmarks Advisory Commission is proposing to forego rehabilitation grants for this 1 year and instead use the money to work with U of O students and staff to create a what's called a comprehensive records management system and GIS interface for our historic resources. So in simple terms, we're going to create a map And it will be an active map where you can click on parcels or buildings, and you'll be able to pull up a history of information that we have available on those parcels. We plan on working in partnership with the Visitors Association and the Albany Regional Museum in order to compile more information than we have just here at the city, and then also to identify ways that we can make the end product even more usable for people out there in the community. This project is going to be one of many that are completed as part of the citywide partnership project with the University of Oregon. It's a program that council authorized us to proceed in. You'll likely hear others talking about that program when they do their budget presentations. It's going to be an exciting program. Credit goes to Bob for putting in the effort to evaluate it, present it to the directors, and help get that presented to council for it to be considered. That's it, unless you have any questions for me.
Each time I get on my high horse about trying to have you folks come up with maps for TPMs, remind me of the workload that you have. Thank you.
You will have maps at the next work session. You're still awake? I know, I just got too much stuff.
Thank you, Jeff.
Safety officer would tell you you're carrying too much.
As you might have guessed, I'll take about as much time as Public Works did unloading their books and packing them up again.
Like I said, half an hour.
And fortunately, our department at this hour of night is small enough that we can probably get right to the heart of the matter. But it is inspiring to follow Public Works. I feel like, the Marine and A Few Good Men who said, "I like you Navy boys, every time there's a war, you give us a ride." And I think that really that's my perspective on Public Works. How else are people going to get to the library, without these, they're happy, they drink their water, safe streets, and they come to the library. Because really, in the end, we are dealing with still 1,000 people plus a day, real people who come in, and we actually greet 1,000 citizens a day, year-round. We hear their stories, we help them, we engage in relationships with them. So it's a wonderful department to work in. I'm proud of the department. I want to thank the advisory board who supports this budget and helps us with policies. I want to thank the Albany Public Library Foundation, who for the last 5 years has put $30,000 to $40,000+ into the day-to-day operation of the Carnegie Library. I want to thank the Friends of the Library and their $20,000 to $30,000 every year that they put into the library budget. Thank Colleen for her work and encourage you to attend the Uncorked if you can next year in early March. It's becoming a really fun event, and all that money comes to the library as well. I want to thank, of course, a great staff of 25, more or less. Half of them are part-time. A bunch of them have master's degrees, highly qualified. There was a little reclassification of positions this year midstream due to retirements and other moving parts. And in this budget, there's one more reclassification that got lost in that shuffle during this year. So otherwise, personnel's the same. The budget, as you see, we're just going to go pretty much through the tab quickly, but let me look at my slides here. All we do is inspire, educate, entertain, challenge, and welcome over 6,700 citizens of every kind, every week, year-round. That's all we do. and we love to do it. And occasionally, if some of them fall asleep, I may even come out of the office and wake them up. That's just the kind of guy I am. And you might want to add some FTE so I don't have to do that. What's fun about the library, and I had a wonderful time with the Kiwanis Club recently and came up with this 51,670 ways to not leave your lover but love the library. If you think about it, pick a book. 51,000 people are going to read a different book, aren't they? It's a fantastic institution that we have. The Oregon Daffodil Society has met in the library for the past 3 years. Huge event, beautiful event. All kinds of people using the meeting room. Here's some of the math. I know you like to see this every year. Just gives you a sense of you ended with workload for Jeff. I think holding steady from the last few years. It's fun to think about the public library as really one of the original recyclers. Think about, we have about 265 items in the building that are continually recycled. The value of the items borrowed is, $15 to $20 million. You just appreciate the public library and what it does. As I said last year, 7 human years spent searching the internet. What's interesting about the internet now is you actually need a guide to the internet, don't you? If you go down this one path, which our folks do, in the end, they're going to be charged money, and we have to pull them out and have them redo the work and get them to where they need to go. Nevertheless, it's a great tool. People come, they can't afford it. Program attendance. Marilyn's thinking that informations is a typo, but that's my new word for reference services and providing information. Tutoring rooms, 4 of them booked solid all the time. Broken printers, we see people occasionally. Job applications every day. We proctor tons of exams, gizmos, how does it work? Can you fix this? I try to download some books, all that sort of, just 35,000 of those interactions. And then, of course, we're the only place in the city that has the full 100-year run of the Democrat Herald on microfilm, so folks come in for that. So it gives you just a snapshot of the numbers, who's who. We have all kinds of people in the meeting room. This was a great event a couple of weekends ago. A couple of our younger patrons. We do grow them. We do grow them. Most popular kids items last year. Checked out Dora the Explorer, Thomas the Tank Engine movies, Downton Abbey and Hunger Games movies, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, kids book. Most checked out manga, anime, Japanese graphic novels. Girl on the Train, the #1 checked out fiction book, and you'll be happy to know, Ed Loy wrote that Albany history gem of the Willamette Valley, and in fact, that's the most popular nonfiction book last year. And of course, puppets, I think they're the 3rd most checked out of the kids' material. So that gives you just a little sense of what we're doing day in and day out. If you'd like to just open the tab, I'll point out a couple of, sorry about this, a couple of things on page 251 for the main budget of the library. I think you'll join me in my excitement with right down in the middle regarding the books budget. That's a significant increase. You can see the math there. And, you'll be glad to know that catches us up to about 15 years ago. So, we're making progress, meaning that's the general fund allotment from 15 years ago. We've been hitting our Oregon Community Foundation really hard, as you know, the last 5-6 years. And what's exciting, the flip side of being able to find some general fund monies, is new projects, new adventures via the endowments that we have. So, and that's our plan moving forward. I'm going to stop there and see if you had any questions about the main program page here on page 251.
hard as your computers get banged on, how often are you replacing those? Because that's a pretty healthy increase in your IT replacement, but I figure you guys are getting that stuff banged on all the time.
They are, and in that number, in all the departments, I think you see ebb and flow, and we raise it when we can, and it actually should be higher. We were able to replace several, Ann probably knows better than I do, I want to say 12 to 15 of those public computers with faster, upgraded capabilities. In our IT, we have an IT staff in the library, and he spreads it out. He makes them last longer than a typical replacement schedule. So, and we have RFID equipment, all kinds of things that go into equipment replacement beyond just PCs. There's a lot of infrastructure. And we also upgraded some security gates, et cetera, all that sort of RFID-related materials, so that's also included. And, 7 years' worth of beating on those machines last year, they do take a beating, and so I hope that answers your question. We stretch them as far as we can.
Thank you.
Ed?
Yes, sir.
You had a pretty successful auction this year. Where do I see that kind of revenue or income, or where that goes?
That's, what was the term used earlier? That's on the balance sheet of the Friends of the Library. And that will come in, sorry, can you hear me? It's driving me nuts, leaning over that thing. If you'll turn to where are we here? 258. When the Friends make a donation, we receive that. They might just pay the library, they might pay the books for a month. They might, cut us a check for $9,000 just to the vendor, or they'll make a donation in that miscellaneous revenue line item. So it comes from them, it comes in various means. But sometimes it's simpler for them to just pay for our request of some materials, some stuff like that. So, but generally, if we do take a lump sum for a project, it'll come via the miscellaneous revenue line item, because they are separate, 501c3, et cetera.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Then we continue on with the smaller trust funds, that really we're just trying to gain a little interest. We're not really spending a whole lot there. You may remember from previous years, page 257, we've reduced the library foundation. There was, this particular page relates only to capital projects. We just wanted to kind of separate out and keep simple, because we try to match with the foundation when we do some renovations on the Carnegie Library. And then I just referenced, we'll go to the next page, when the foundation does contribute for books, like you can see on page 258, for that kind of revenue, we'll capture it via the community foundation. And sometimes they also write checks directly, and those show up in the various other pots of money floating around. Not really, Stuart. But it really, as you know, it's a wonderful thing. The library, people love libraries throughout the country, and they contribute, that we have to really decent foundations has made a world of difference. Then the state library grant, as it references on the left side, that's strictly per capita via the state for kids under 18. So it's not really a grant per se. I mean, if as long as we follow their protocols, that sort of comes every year, so. That's some of our story. I really hope that during the year, as we implement whatever budget's adopted, that you come by. If you really want to catch a snapshot of Albany and its people and all their glory, come on by. There's a lot going on. We could stay as long as Public Works. Believe me, I could tell you all kinds of amazing stories and impact that we're having, one person at a time. It's really a great institution, still going well. Questions? Please.
I have one. It looks like you purchase a lot of books. What is your primary source?
For books? There are vendors, as you might imagine. If you go down I-5 in Roseburg, you see Ingram. Have you seen that big building on the left going south?
Oh.
That's a national company. So they're a vendor that we use, I would say probably, books-wise, 80% of our business. We do negotiate with them every year for the best price. Generally, we're getting 40, Amazon-like reductions in most of our books, and then some of the other things aren't as much, the more expensive. But Ingram, there's a group called Midwest Tape. A lot of our books on CD come from Midwest Tape. We do use Amazon, when we can't find something, we want to get something really popular. So we try to look for the best. I think over the years, I've tried to make clear we're pretty lean and mean when it comes to, how we spend the money, and so wherever the best deal is, and we look at that all the time. It's a good question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ed?
Yes, please.
I had a first grader from Central tell me recently that she was starting tutoring for reading at the public library once a week. She said for an hour and a half. That sounded long. One-on-one in a room?
That is correct.
Is that part of your GAPS collaboration, or what kind of programs?
No, the tutors are their own entity, and I'm sure I know her very well. I think I was kind of giving her a hard time actually today. I usually joke a lot with the patrons and get in trouble for that, I know, but no, GAPS, and again, that we visit the schools year-round. The schools tour, we provide tours, especially for the younger kids who haven't been to the libraries as much, give them a sense of what's there, et cetera, et cetera. So the flow is more us going into the schools, doing story times, promoting programs, literacy, but they also come and join us. Project we're working on now is, and it's taking a while to get through the bureaucracies, is basically exploring a GAP student who has an ID, so middle school through high school, accommodating that school ID as a library card when they come in. Otherwise, the parents can never make it to, for whatever the reasons, can't make it to the library to sign the kids up. So the schools have already vetted, the schools are collecting the information that we need, address, parents, contact, etc. Our open source software can work with, so we're finalizing some of those details. That's a new project, and in theory it sounds awesome. The working it out and really marketing it and getting the actual kids to use their student IDs. This will, we hope, still some more wrinkles. That'll start in September, we hope. So that's one of those things.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Ed.
You are very welcome. Thank you for staying awake, and I appreciate your support, and see you at the library.
You might want to be a little careful with the Marine Corps Navy thing. That's a relationship that has always been tenuous at best.
I'm just quoting, sir.
Yeah. It's the look on the check, United States Marine Corps, Department of the Navy.
That is correct. Talk to Kiefer Sutherland, I stole it from him.
All right.
Thank you.
Is there any other business for tonight? Nobody dares bring up a topic.
Monkey business.
All right, our next meeting is Tuesday, May 17th, and so this meeting will continue on